All right. Well, how's it going, Tim? It's good to have you.
It's good to be
I
here.
really appreciate you being willing to come on and share your story or stories, maybe
Yeah,
story of your life, but kind of what God's done through some struggles. That's what this is all about. I thought maybe what we could do is just go back to probably when the some of your struggles certainly began when you were 9 and lost your mom. Tell us a little bit about kind of how that happened and what.
sure. So we grew up, family, 4 kids, mom and dad, pretty normal
Mm-hmm.
household as far as we could tell as kids,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Um,
You're 9, so
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. My mom was the one that plugged us in with us going to church. She was a
Mm-hmm.
believer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when we were like I said, I was around 9, and she would get allergy shots monthly. And at that time too, I remember hearing like how at that time it was becoming controversial in like mainstream as far as allergy shots,
Okay.
like how they could be risky.
Okay.
And I remember this that it was supposedly supposed to be like her last one of her last shots or something. Then she was gonna try something else,
Okay.
and which just kind of adds a little bit to that. Like, man, that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she went and got an allergy shot. This was in a November of '93,
Mm-hmm.
and she had an allergic reaction, went into a coma, um, never saw her again.
She had the reaction at the place where she got the shot, the doctor's office.
Yep.
Okay. So it was
Um,
like right away. It's not like she came home and
right,
yeah.
exactly. And so we're all at the house, and we're like, "Where's mom at?" And we never. It was getting late. It's almost dinner time, 6 o'clock or something. All of a sudden, my dad calls Brandy, my older sister, and
Mm-hmm.
hey, come meet us. My grandparents live next door. Hey, come meet us over at Nan's house. We gotta have a talk. So we get down. We all get down there, and it's there. Everybody's standing around, so something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing stuff as a young kid right there, like something about a shot. And I remember talking with my little sister. I'm like, what happened? Mom got shot. Like
Yeah.
had no clue what was
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
So something was wrong. And then they tell us what happened, and how she got a reaction to an allergy shot, and she was in a coma.
Mm.
Um, and that hopefully that she would come out of it, and we're praying, and everything will be all right. And it wasn't like we didn't all assume that like she was gonna die.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, but it ended up getting to a point. I think she was in a coma for about a month or so,
Oh wow.
and it got to that point where they're like, it's that's it. Like she at that
What do you
point.
remember about that month? Was it just sort of like, well, or were you afraid, or I mean, you
Yeah,
were 9, so
yeah. It's one problem that I've had in life. It's funny. Is like I always say that I'm like I don't remember anything. And I think that's like a coping mechanism in life where like you deal with trauma and you're like not even looking at it. I'm just
yeah,
gonna look forward.
yeah.
And
Meanwhile, it's battering you from behind.
yeah, and so there's a lot of things that I don't remember. But there's some things I remember obviously. But so during that time I remember it was just like a wondering of like you're
Right.
not really sure. You
Right.
didn't even think for 1 second that it wasn't gonna work out, like she wasn't gonna come home.
Yeah.
Like as a kid you're just it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
you know and then we get the call, another family meeting, meet at
Mhm.
Nan's, and then my dad walks in. He's got a Dalmatian puppy. um I think it was like
Yeah. Hey, at least we have something, kid.
it was just kind of like it was a weird moment in life.
Yeah.
um and we're like, and everybody starts crying, and then that's when we all realize that she had
Mhm.
passed away. And it was tough, man. I just remember the one thing I remember the most is like waking up in my bed, and having that feeling of being like, was it a dream?
Right.
Like, God, let it be a dream, right?
Yeah.
Like, was it a dream? I do remember that vividly, this moment,
Mm.
waking up like that as a kid. But it was like, yeah, it wasn't a dream.
How
Um,
did your other siblings handle it? Brandy's a little older.
I think the what's interesting too about that is like I feel like we never really talked about it like that. It was like it was almost as if you know, when it happened, we all kind of went our separate ways as far as how we dealt with
Dealt with
that.
it.
You
Yeah.
know, like we didn't continue to have like a family council going on where like,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
we did do individual. We had to go to like school counseling. I don't remember really any of that. Like I could imagine I was like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
probably what my conversation was with the guidance counselor.
Mm.
The one thing I do remember is that it's when I became, um, I definitely had a strong sense of like believing in God at that point in my life,
Mm.
because it was like I would say it's probably because of how like that's all I could do, right? Like when you get to that point in life and there's nothing you can do
Mm-hmm.
to change the situation, you have to turn to God and trust Him and have faith.
Right. Right.
I think it was like that moment in my life where I started to develop my faith.
Yeah.
You know, at a young age, where it was like the seeds were planted. I believe my mom was in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like having to deal with life and death, it makes you confront that reality.
Right.
So it did plant that seed in me at a young age, and I just remembered there's something more. There's more than this life, you know. And so at that age, being 9, I'd say like that's a it's maybe not typical for kids to have to deal with that
No.
and confront that, but that's where like my faith was planted in is with from my mom. You know, she was the one
Right.
that brought us to church, and when she died, the one biggest thing I remember was that she was so loved.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't
Okay.
talk about this that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she was so loved in our community that like so many people
Outpouring of,
came
yeah.
to our family, and I just remember that, like, man, she was like an angel,
Mm.
you know. I must have heard that 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Your mother was an angel, you know. But
Mm.
yeah, I do remember that, and that stuck with me. You know that she was 31.
Mm.
You know that's young.
Yeah.
But she had touched so many people's lives, and I just remember that that feeling of being proud of her.
Mm.
You know,
Wow.
like she was just a great woman.
Yeah.
You know, and that was one of my biggest takeaways.
Was there anger at all? Like, because feel shortchanged. Like, okay, she's in heaven, but I have a great mom like that, and I only get her for 9 years.
You know, I became this type of person where I thought everything was like this big story,
Mm.
and it's just part of your story, bro.
Mm.
And like when I was from that age, that's one of the things I had dealt with as well, was like embracing like this is just part of your story that God has for you.
Yeah.
It's gonna be okay, you
Yeah.
know. And like obviously as a 9-year-old, I mean, there's many adults that aren't having this grasp of this faith of like there's God has a plan. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure somebody kept saying that to me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as like maybe my aunt, maybe my, you know, the people at our church. But I grabbed onto that,
Mm.
and I was like, it's okay. Mom's in heaven. It's going to be okay. You know, we'll get there. We'll see her again, you know. And that was kind of, I definitely lived my life um, with that in the back of my mind. Like, this is just part of your story. It's okay. You
Mm.
know, I think sometimes I thought, you know, as we get into my testimony, I definitely was, what's the word for that? It's not a good word. It's like when you think you're like, that's part of your story,
Like
bro.
fate, or almost like an excuse.
No, like almost like like you have a big purpose.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Like
like
you're in
it
a
was
like you're
partly a good thought to have, but also you can see
yeah.
the
Like you're in a star of a movie,
you
not
know,
an extra.
yeah, yeah, like yeah, Truman Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just part of your story, bro.
Yeah. Wow.
I think that was kind of how I coped with it in a way too. Like that's just like put your head down, keep going, be toughen up, and it's part of your story.
So what did you do? Your mom's gone. Like, how did you?
So that was when I started playing basketball. Actually, right around that age.
Mhm.
My aunt Nancy's daughter, she played.
Mhm.
Karen, she comes here,
Yeah.
and she's the one that got me into basketball.
Really?
God bless her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she used to beat me so bad. But she was the one that got me into it. But I got into basketball, man, and I just put my head down and just started playing. I had a hoop outside my house. We had a park down the street,
Mm.
and that's what I did. By the time I was like 10, 11, like I always had free reign to just walk down to the park and play and shoot hoops, and I'd be there till dark, and I did that every day for my whole, my whole childhood. Really, that's what I did. I lived at the street ball courts, and I really believed I was going to be in the NBA, and you get these fantastic ideas,
Sure.
and that's kind of how
That's still a healthy way to cope.
Yeah, that was where I found purpose in my life. Like, I'm gonna hit these threes, bro. I'm getting my 300 shots a day, and I'm good,
Yeah.
And that's what we did, and it was a blessing. Basketball is still to this day. I just played last night. I love it. It was one of the best. I do believe basketball is a Christian sport.
Yeah. It'll keep you humble, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got beat up last night.
So you ended up moving to Florida, though, right?
Yep. So after my mom passed away, understandably that was really tough for my dad. My father wasn't the big church influence in our family.
Right.
So we stopped going to church pretty much, after my mom passed away. And, my dad had a hard time dealing with it. There was some things that happened. He ended up having to do a little bit of time. That was tough. We ended up, when he got back, he was like, let's start fresh. We moved to Florida.
Okay.
Where
in Florida?
We were out in the West Coast, Citrus Springs, Florida, right by like Ocala area, not far from Ocala. Kind of like I wouldn't, if you go to Florida, this is not where you want to go to Florida. Like Citrus,
not vacation land.
Citrus Springs is like the Florida like desert.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's like you're like 15 minutes from the Gulf Coast though. But like once you get into like the Ocala, that foresty national forest of Florida, it is like monstrous, wild creatures everywhere, and like you'll be standing somewhere, next thing you know you got 100 fire ants on your foot.
No.
But Florida was interesting, man. Definitely. But so that's Citrus Springs. That's where we started out in Florida. So we had, like I said, I had two sisters and a brother. My older sister, she was a senior in high school up here still, so she stayed to finish her school. So it was just
Who'd
me.
she stay with
my grandparents.
Okay.
So we ended up. It was me, Bethany, and Joe. We all moved down to Florida with my dad. Now, so I had just been starting high school. Okay. So we talked about when my mom passed away. I was like 9. So we have like that middle school, that 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade period. That was when I kind of went, like, we had that time with my pops away, and then, so I'm starting in Florida as a freshman at this point.
Okay.
And I was going to a big high school with like 4 different towns that all went to it, just facing the crowd. Got down there, kind of had free reign still, just like it was before, where like I found the nearest court, and that's what I did every day. I'd get home from school, go down to the courts, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
Now, at that point in my life, though, I started to get involved and make some bad choices. It was like you start getting around the wrong friends. We all know the story. Next thing you know, you're smoking weed, this and that. So I started doing the double life, and it started up here. It did start in like 8th grade up here before I left. Where like I remember, I never forget it. Like Allen Iverson started smoking weed. I'll never forget this. He got busted. This people don't realize the influence these little things have on a child.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it, because I looked up and I'm like, Allen Iverson, dude. I was working on his crossovers every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it came out, and this was right when the internet really started to take off.
Yeah.
And I remember going on NBA.com, and I see this article, Allen Iverson fails a drug test for weed, right? And at it was like the same month, man, my one of my best friends was like, dude, I smoked weed the other day. And it was like, it all happened at the same time.
Yeah.
Where like something that I would have never considered. Next thing you know, I was like, oh, okay. If Allen Iverson's doing it and my buddy's doing it.
Right.
So that's kind of how I started to cross that bridge.
Yeah.
And I remember it vividly, like the first time you smoke weed and like all that nonsense that goes with it, you know? And we grew up in that culture, with the hip hop culture. and it was like it just was taking off, man. Where that's what was cool. We all
Yeah.
thought we were cool,
Mm-hmm.
but I like at that time I was a really good student,
Mm-hmm.
really good basketball player. I was setting some records out here,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a good trajectory. Like
Yeah.
most of my peers were like, "This dude's gonna go do something with basketball."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everybody thought that,
Mm-hmm.
when I moved, they were like, "No, they're like, we need him. We need
Yeah,
him. We
right,
need
right.
him."
Team's gonna be good. Oh, not so good.
And so that kind of that. So then I landed in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of my dad, like I said, he was like he
Struggling
kind
with
of
his own stuff.
yeah, and I kind of he trusted me. He didn't have a need to like watch me as far as he felt. So I had a lot of free reign, and I learned at a young age how to do like the double life thing where like everything's great and like I'm
Yeah.
a great student and
Mm-hmm.
a great basketball player and a gentleman but then later on that night I'm out hanging out with guys that are heading into the darkness, and they got heading down the wrong path with bad influences.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start messing around, smoking weed, selling weed, nothing major, like a kid. I'm 15, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I end up so it's funny the way the story went was like I was a freshman at Lecanto High School, and I had my first dunk. It
Mm.
was like the first day I dunked. I was so pumped. I was like, "Yes, I'm fun." Because me and my buddies, we were always training to dunk,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I get my first dunk. Next day in practice, I go up and try to take off on the scrimmage and roll my ankle,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, "That's what I get." And then so now I got a sprained ankle. I'm out of school, or I'm not playing. We have an away game. I'm out in Crystal River, Florida, right? Some random high school. I'm just a guy facing the crowd. I'm dressed out. My team's playing, but I'm on the bench. I go to use the bathroom, and a buddy I know from school, obviously not a great buddy, but a person I knew, he asked me, he's like, "Hey, you got some bud on you, right?" He's like, "Can you give my buddy a bag of bud, whatever?" We're in the bathroom. And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I'm thinking I'm all cool. "Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
got you, bro."
Yeah. Yeah.
Give the dude a bag of bud, and there was somebody had witnessed it. I'll never forget it. I'm walking back into the gym, and there's a cop at the door, and I'm about 10 feet behind this guy, and he turns to the cop. He's like, "That kid behind me just sold somebody some weed. He's got weed on him," right? And I'll never forget it, dude. My heart dropped. I'm
Oh,
like,
man.
"Oh no!" I just bang a left. And I'm like, I'm going through this school. I don't even know this school.
Right.
So now I'm just walking through a random school. I'm like in a courtyard.
Right.
I'm like going through a classroom. I hear walkie-talkies. They're like, "He's going through the courtyard." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." They get me. They pull me into a classroom. They search me, find weed. I get arrested. I leave there in handcuffs. Call my dad from the police station. Hey, he's like shocked. He's like, "What?" You know what I mean? He didn't know I was smoking weed at the time, And so he comes, bails me out, and I end up getting expelled from that as a freshman, which was like, that was my first, first time I had been in trouble. First time I got arrested. I got arrested quite a bit throughout my younger years. I always tell people, don't Google me, man. Don't Google me. But yeah, and that's kind of where I started. And that path that trend kept going. That double life trend was something I did well for a long time. I mean, I wouldn't say
not
well.
Everybody does it well. You clearly did it better than some,
I mean, maybe well is not the best description.
Well, no.
It's so negative, but
yeah, it's a negative thing.
You did a good job at being
bad. You were successful at living a double life.
Yeah, right, yeah. So we go so now I'm expelled. I'm a freshman in Florida. I end up getting my aunt does homeschool up north, so I'm able to sign on to her homeschool thing and get credits. So I end up getting my credits at the end of my freshman year, and now I'm still hanging out with the wrong guys. Like, I still lived the life of going playing ball every day, but then after the sun would set, now we're all hanging out at the court smoking weed.
Yeah.
That was kind of the culture back then. And so we're at the end of that year, my dad ended up getting a little bit of an issue. We had to move back up north.
Okay.
So I ended up going back as a sophomore up to Blackstone.
Your teammates are like, "Yeah, he's back."
Yeah, and I was not in the best shape though.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, what happened to you?"
Right. I've had I had some big swings of like being super good and then being out of shape. And if you like we talked about that.
Yeah.
If you're out of shape, dude,
Yeah.
forget it.
Yeah.
You can't play. You're not
Yeah.
hooping if you're out
Yeah.
of shape. You can have the best three in the driveway.
Yeah,
and
but-
it ain't gonna translate.
No.
So I'm up here and I'm living with my aunt.
Mhm.
And me and my brother and sisters. Brady's still at my grandparents.
Yeah.
And so I'm up here living, and I'm doing the same thing though. I'm doing the double life thing.
Mm-hmm.
I end up we're like in my buddy comes to a classroom. We're sitting in class. He comes to the door of the classroom. It's like the end of the day, kind of. You know how that is, where no, like teachers are like everyone's
Yeah.
cool, and the kid stops by the door. Hey, what's up, dude? You know. Well, my buddy's like, hey, come, let's go to the bathroom. Let's go rip a butt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even smoke cigarettes,
Right.
like at the time. You know what I mean? Like I didn't smoke, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take a walk with you, bro. I go to the bathroom with them. Oh, next thing you know, here comes the principal. Oh, we smell smoke. He's got the cop with him, the school police officer. They start searching us. Well, I had butt on me because I was doing the double life thing still, like an idiot.
Yeah.
Why I had it with me, who knows? But I did. And so I ended up getting arrested for weed as a sophomore and kicked out of school again. Unreal. And
2 for 2.
Unreal. And the sad part about it was that I always had good grades and like I had a lot of potential, and I would just kept doing this. Like, what are you doing?
What was your feelings about God at that point?
So,
if any?
so at that point in my life, I really wasn't like, you know, my mom, the death of my mom really planted the seeds in me. So I was a believer. I didn't buy into like the new modernist atheism
Yeah.
stuff that might be going around at the time. I just always believed, right?
Right.
But so I wasn't, but I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Like I didn't understand, like I didn't know Jesus. I didn't understand scripture, Christology, or like what salvation is and my need for a savior. I didn't understand any of that stuff, you know. I did believe, but
You know, there's a God. My mom's in heaven.
yeah, and I think it's like one of those things like you put on the back burner.
Yeah.
I listened to a lot of hip hop growing up.
Yeah.
I started to rap when I was younger. And I think one of the themes is this theme of like, we're going to put in this work, and eventually once we get this money, then we're going to get out and get right and give back to the community, and we'll get back to church. And I think I kind of always had that mentality, like, you know, right now I'm just a kid doing my thing, but I mean, obviously I'm going to be a man of honor one day. Right? Like it's just like my thinking.
And like you said, it's kind of common thinking that that people will think that that God's okay with me doing this now, because obviously down the road, versus no, he wants all of me now. And to trust him.
Right.
But yeah, it's almost like just push it down the road.
Yeah, it's like a procrastinating theme like that happens where you're like, oh well, we're gonna take care of it. We're gonna get our souls.
Yeah, I'm not going to be a criminal forever.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be a heathen. I'm not going to hell, bro.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where I was at. It wasn't much thought put into it. There was some, you know, back then there was some hip hop artists that, you know, they were kind of like what they call like not a crossover, but like they would mention the things of God or of things of that nature in the midst of debauchery. Like one song they're talking about this and that and you know, guns and crime and sex, and then on the next song it's like, oh, I'll see you when you get there.
Yeah.
You know, when we're all in heaven. And it's like, so there was this theme of like, oh, like back then all the rappers had Jesus crosses.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there was this theme going on in the culture then where like I believed in Jesus. Like I guess. I mean, I don't know. That was like the culture. It's like when they say you're culturally a Christian, it's like, sure, we got our Jesus piece on, but like we're out here
following them.
We're selling drugs out here, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a misconception on what Jesus is and what he's called us to, clearly. Right. But so at that point, as a sophomore, I really didn't have much thought into it. It was just like a second. That was like a, you know, look, we'll think about that later, so to speak, you know. But when I got expelled, so now I'm expelled, I'm living at my aunt's house. And they're kind of like, they don't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
Like they're shocked by it, you know, that I got in trouble again. Because it's like, as far as everybody knew, everything was going great.
Playing ball, grades are fine.
Yeah, what happened?
Now he's expelled again.
Yeah.
Back to the homeschool?
Yes. Yeah. So I end up going out one night, going to meet a girl, had a backpack with a bottle of Captain Morgan's in it. This is probably 2 a.m. I'm walking through Blackstone. I remember it. I was on Riley Ave. And I remember it, tried to run, then gave up right away. I'm like, you know what? You got me. Stumbling through someone's yard. So I'm on probation because I had just gotten expelled and arrested. So they end up, I have to go to like, I'll never forget, it was weird. They transported me to Worcester. I went to like some orphanage for a day. It was weird. Kind of helped me to see all that. I was like, this is weird. This is crazy. I'm like, I don't want
here.
this.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting back to my aunt's house. Well, or no, I'm sorry. So I have to go to court.
Mm-hmm.
My main man, John Staples, you can check him out later. We'll talk about him later.
Yeah.
But he shows up to court and kind of tries to.
He's someone that went to church with you?
Yeah, he was like a mentor of mine growing up. Like he knew my family story and he knew me from school. And for whatever reason, he knew I was a real good basketball player and stuff. And so he just saw a lot of potential in me. So he like didn't give up on me. You know what I mean? He's like, man, we gotta. So he always kind of reached out to me and tried to encourage me and my friends.
Yeah.
And then when I started to go through that, he definitely like reached out to me like personally, and like he'd open the gym for me and stuff like that. So he shows up to court for me and gets the judge. So the judge sentenced me to house arrest at my grandparents', right? Okay. So he petitions that. And like he was like a principal. He wasn't a principal at the time, but he was a well-known figure in the town as far as being a gentleman, a good man,
influence,
good community member. And he convinced the judge to let him take me out, supervised. So like while I was on house arrest, there was one person I could leave with. That was with John. So that was a blessing. And he'd take me to the gym and we'd have good conversations. And he was a Christian man, so that was a blessing for me. He was like the guy I looked to, like, oh, that's a good dude.
Yeah.
He was like a good influence on me.
Yeah.
And like never, it was one of those guys, just very temperate, like always very patient, not like, just a real gentleman.
Yeah.
And so during that time I'm on house arrest, I'm living with my grandparents, right? So we talked about this a little bit. My grandparents were very religious. And I mean, I don't want to say religious in a bad way. Yeah. They were very faithful. And they come from like the Seventh-day Adventist side of things, and they were very into prophecy.
Yeah.
Right. And their eschatology was very like apocalyptic. Like right now, the world's gonna end any minute. So which can be helpful and harmful depending on how you look at it.
Like all things, right?
Right. Yeah. plan to live 1,000 years, but realize that it might not be. This could be your last day. Right. Yeah. That's probably one good take on it. But so they really started to open my eyes, like, because I was a good student, right? And so I was good. I was a book smart guy. I could like read and understand things and write. And so when I started to get into, like, they started giving me all this prophetical stuff, trying to get me to read the Bible and stuff. And some of the stuff, man, it really was profound. Like, just, I mean, if anybody looks at the prophecies in the Bible, honestly, from like a scholastic standpoint, it's hard to not be like, something's going on here. This is pretty wild, Yeah. And that's when I was about 16 at the time, and that's when I really started to change. Like my worldview started to change in like the way I saw God and like the world, and I really started to get a hold of realizing like, no, the Bible is definitely true. Like there's definitely something here. I was on house arrest for about 8 months, I think, and so that was during that time period where I was spending a lot of time studying. Like I'd do my homeschool work, get my homeschool done, and then I'd study the Bible. What
else are you gonna do, right?
But the funny thing about it is like this, looking back, because now it's like I've been studying the Bible for a long time, and it's like it's so funny because I started in like Revelations and Daniel, which is like it's a strange place to begin studying the Bible, But that's what drew me in was like that concept of like, whoa, like. There's something big here. Right. There's something going on here, The Bible is very it's like that enchantment of like, whoa, there's actually, it's like C.S. Lewis Narnia, like, whoa, there's something.
Right.
It's like it opens your mind and your imagination, and you realize like there's something bigger going on here than this matrix, so to speak, But so that's when I really started to develop my belief that the Bible's true. Yeah. So that's like, so when my mom passed away, I realized there was something bigger here, right? Like God is real. Like that was something that I held to. And then when at that time being on house arrest and studying like prophecy and stuff like that, that was when I realized the Bible is true, right? Now, I didn't come to Christ at that point. You know, I wasn't a Christian. I didn't understand salvation, but I understood that the Bible was true. Like for me, that whether or not how I got there was like the right way to get to that position of believing the Bible is true.
Yeah.
I believe the Bible is true because of that, you know? So it really impacted me big time and changed my thought, you know, my worldview. And I remember going through this moment of like a depression. It was weird. It was like a heavy depression, man, for like a week. And it's weird for like a 16-year-old kid. And like the depression that I felt was like my eyes were open to the darkness of this world. Like to where how heavy it is. Like, no, this world is in trouble, man. Like we're all messing around, playing basketball, hanging out with our friends like kids do. And like, you know, we're not even thinking about anything other than just like the pettiness of the here and now and stuff. And all of a sudden I'm like isolated from all my friends. I'm on house arrest.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see like, there's a big problem here. Like this world's messed up, you know? And I remember like feeling really depressed, like sorrowful, cried even. When I started to have that eye-opening moment of like, man, like this world is a mess, bro. You know, and it's not looking good. And like prophetically, we're in trouble. You know, like there's bad stuff. And I started to buy into that. Maybe like it could be real soon.
Right.
You know, and that can be harmful because then you know, you can live in fear. You can start to operate out of fear and like anxiety. Which I think that was kind of like maybe some of the feelings, emotions I was having. But so that was, and I remember another thing was that I think I told you about this too, is like my grandparents always had Jehovah's Witnesses come over to talk, right? And so it's like my introduction to scripture was like Daniel, Revelations, and then apologetics against Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, that's how my introduction to the Bible started. And so it's just an interesting place to be, you know?
Well, it shows that God, you know, obviously it took a while for you to come to Christ, but God is putting those pieces into place. You know, that he's, even if it's real messy and we don't respond the way we should, it's a great lesson in that there is a journey. It's also a great lesson. Someone's, especially like, you know, your family certainly taking you in, but for someone like John, who didn't really see the fruit till quite a while, right? And he could have given up on you. So like, well, God, obviously he's not, you know.
Yeah.
Because I think we all want it to be a movie where we sit down and say, hey, here's how it is. And sometimes it happens like that, but usually not. And so it's hard, but it should encourage people to just say, you know, keep trying to impact people.
Yep.
Because those seeds, they
Amen.
will grow. God will do what he's going to do. You know, and you can see that all over your life, even if you weren't quite responding.
Right, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you can see the seeds being planted.
So you go from house arrest to back to school, or what happened then?
So after house arrest, now I was going in, that was the end of my sophomore year. So I got so my father, we had some struggles going on with our situation, which is why we left Florida in the first place.
Yeah.
So things got situated. He bought another place over on the east coast of Daytona, which was, or Florida, I should say, which is a much nicer part of Florida.
Yeah.
So we're living like 10 miles south of Daytona Beach in New Smyrna Beach. My dad bought a house out there. So me and Joe and Beth, we leave my Aunt Nancy's and we all move back in with my dad. And it was like, I kind of I remember that feeling of like kind of going back into the same thing, like knowing it, like having that conviction of being like, are you going to just go back into the same?
Right,
like,
because you were dealing with this heaviness of the world, and now you're like, I have the opportunity to just jump back into it.
Just go back to like the cliche of the world. And and I pretty much did. I just got right back into basketball. Basketball was my full focus, but I still had that leaven, man, of like wanting to go and hang out with some dudes and be cool and go smoke some weed after we get done playing and all that type of stuff. And it was always there where I didn't repent from that stuff by any means. I was not convicted like I should have been. And I mean, clearly, you know, I didn't have the Holy Spirit in my life. that's where
Right.
the conviction really comes from.
Sure.
So I had the way that seems right to a young man. That's how I was operating. And so I'm down in Florida. I'm a junior. Um, I'm at a good school. I'm playing for a good basketball team. I actually had the same coach as Vince Carter, which was cool. You know, I was like, oh, this guy, Coach Stevenson, he was a good guy. And, you know, I was the only junior on the team. It was all seniors. And he reached out to me and was like, you know, listen, I know you're better than our point guard here, but he's been here his whole life and worked hard to be here. He's like, but next year, he's like, this is your team, you know? And he was under the impression that I should, you know, I have a lot of opportunity to go play college ball, stuff like that, you know? And which you know, I obviously, in my mind, I'm like, I should have went to the league, bro. Watching Peyton Pritchard, I'm like, that's my style. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, my doppelganger. You know?
Every little white guy thinks they're Peyton, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. He gives hope.
Yeah, he does. He does.
The man spreads hope. But yeah, so I'm involved with that team. I'm playing ball. I had at that point, I remember in New Smyrna, I had like straight A's.
Yeah.
So I was doing well, you know. But Florida school, I'm gonna lie, it's very easy compared to.
Yeah.
If you go from Mass to Florida, brother, you better get straight A's.
Yeah, the school systems are not the
It's
greatest.
a little different. I mean, I don't know where they're at right now,
Yeah.
but you know, back then, it was like much more money was spent on making sure we had brand new shoes and jumpsuits and like versus you know,
the books.
yeah, the laptops or whatever. I know I remember that getting on that team. It was like I couldn't believe all the gear we got. Like we even had one game at the TD Garden or TD Waterhouse where the Magic played. So it was like a pretty cool experience for me to come from Little Blackstone.
Yeah.
And then, whoa, I'm like playing against like D1, people that are heading to D1. You know what I mean? Like high level basketball. It was cool.
So clearly you didn't end up going. So what happened?
So yeah, clearly broken hoop dream. I start so by the end of my junior year,
I mean, you are in the Blackstone Men's League. So, I mean, in a way, you've made it. Depending on.
Let's be clear. The dream is still alive. All right. The season's not over yet, boys. We just lost in double overtime last night. Oh, tough loss. Yeah, so at this point I'm still half stepping, living the double life, smoking weed, not really committed. Got good grades, got the whole thing going where it looks like I'm doing great, you know. But there's a lot of love in there. And I had a guy move in next door to me when I was living in Florida, and a guy from Miami. And he was older than me. I was like 17 at the time. He was like 25. He's all tatted up, gold teeth, always had a pistol.
Oh, man.
And
There was nothing about that said, maybe not the guy I should be hanging with.
well, you know, when you're young like that, you think it's cool. Like we were so influenced by like hip hop culture. Like we thought being gangster.
He was a hip hop guy.
Yeah. So that's the story with him, was that he had a record label and a studio in Miami, and he just got raided in some big heroin sting, and he had fled, and he was staying with his cousin.
Yeah.
So and I was friends with his cousin. That's how I met him. You know, all of a sudden, like I didn't talk to him at all for the first couple months because he was kind of scary.
Yeah, right.
You know, but then he started to open up, and we started to talk a little bit, and then I started to show him some of my music because I had been making music all this whole time. I know we didn't talk much about it, but throughout this whole time, I had always written. You know, I was big onto writing songs. I wrote a lot of songs. I probably wrote 500 songs throughout like high school as far as hip hop goes. So that was one of my things too. So he's like, I show him some of my music. He's like, let's make some music together. You know, he makes beats, whatever. So next thing you know, I'm thinking it's so cool. I'm like, all right, dude, I'm getting a plug with the guy with a label.
Gold
you
teeth,
know,
baby.
The dude's been shot 5 times. I'm like, really cool guy. You know? And, you know, but next thing you know, we're hanging out. I'm smoking my weed. Next thing you know, he's putting a little something different in his weed. You know? And now I'm starting to get introduced to that side of things where he's got coke with him. He's normal. You know what I mean? And now that's starting to become a thing in my life where, you know, oh, I'll hit that, whatever, you know? And so I'm starting to cross that line. Now, this is like going into my senior year. This is like the summer of that.
Yeah.
So he's like, one day he's like talking about, oh, we can make a killing if we went down to Miami. I got the plug right now. We could triple it up here. And I'm like, you know, I'm sitting there with him and I'm like, dude, I got a car. let's go. You know,
So he didn't have a car. That was the story.
Because he's all on the run.
Yeah.
He can't get, whatever. Yeah. Looking back now, I'm like, this dude's probably a loser. But,
but at the time,
yeah,
he was the hero.
yeah, definitely. I remember there was one time where like somebody had messed with my little sister, and was causing trouble at my house when I was gone, right? Like during the day at school.
Yeah.
And dude was like having people meet him outside for like selling crack, stuff like this. It was a messed up situation. Long story. I don't want to get too far into it.
Yeah.
Go down that whole thing. But anyways, it was a problem that I was dealing with where I was getting really frustrated hearing these stories like this dude's doing this. And I told this guy about it, and he ends up shattering the kid's windows with his pistol, pulls him out the car, pistol whips him, all this type of stuff. He solved the problem for me, right?
Sounds like it.
So that was like, I'm like, this dude's great friend to have. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
great
one,
good times. So I'm like, yeah, I got a car, let's go. Next thing you know, we start taking trips down to West Perron, Miami, which is like, if you know West Perron, you don't want to know West Perron. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the craziest place I've ever seen. Like I would not recommend even driving through there. It's like, he's like, yeah, when we drive up, just make sure you don't go too slow. Because like dudes, it's like if they see you, it's not going to go down well. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm just going to be in trouble for being a little white dude out here. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's like all night long. I remember we meet the Connect. We stay at the Connect's house overnight. And like he's got all these video cameras, and all night long helicopters. And I'm like, bro, there's helicopters out there last night. I'm like, what's that about? He's like, dude, that's every night. I'm like, what? I'm like, every night there's just helicopters patrol. Helicopters are on patrol apparently in this neighborhood.
Well, they don't want to drive around.
I'm like, that's crazy, man. And so that's how that kind of started. So I drive back. Now we're starting to do that. It becomes a thing. We did it quite a few times where we drove to Miami, came and brought stuff back. So that was my summer of my junior year. And I'm thinking this is all cool and all good. And when you're a kid, you don't feel the effects like that. You can stay up all night, dude.
Yeah.
You just don't realize how awful this actually unhealthy this actually is for you. I remember in my senior year when it started, I remember a couple of times of like getting back into town from Miami, at like 8 a.m. and getting to like second period on time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've been up all night, and I think I'm so cool too. Like, let's be clear. Like, I thought I'm such a G. You know what I mean? Like, it's so cool. Such nonsense, man. And so during that year, my senior year, man, I really started to believe that I'm about to blow up and get a record deal, and I really don't need basketball. And I was like, and I started to convince myself, I don't want to play basketball every day of my life. I'll make millions doing something else.
Yeah.
Right? And so I literally just started to fade away and walk away. And I ended up like dropping out in my senior year. I just started skipping school all the time. And my dad didn't really know what was going on, but once he caught wind of it, he was just kind of like, look, you need to go get your GED. You're not living with me if you're going to be some dropout and not move forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I went and got my GED, and I just went ghost from Coach Stevenson. I ended up bumping into him like a year later, randomly in public, and he was just like, Tim,
what happened to you?
What the heck, bro? It was sad. It almost makes me cry right now, man. Yeah. But anyways, so I had walked away from basketball, man, and really started to, and I wasn't really pursuing hip hop either. Like, I was just kind of just chilling, hanging out like a kid. You know what I mean? I went and got my GED, and now I'm just hanging out. I'm not working. My dad finally got annoyed with me and was like, you need to go get a job. You know what I mean? So I started working at a restaurant, you know what I mean? Whatever. First job as a kid. At this point, I'm like, I think I'm 18 around that time, right after end of my senior year. I end up meeting my wife. So this is an interesting, so try try to frame this so it's not a confusing story. So yeah, so my senior year, I just kind of fizzle out, drop out of school, throw away all my opportunities, total loser. Wasn't really like pursuing hip hop, like, you know, like I said, like that was my motive to like leave basketball because I didn't think I needed that. But then, yeah, I wasn't really I wasn't working hard on any other front. So it was like there was a lot of delusion going on there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Really being a loser. And then you get your tag along friends. So now I got buddies that come over every day. And it's like you got this wild chaos going on all the time. Becomes this thing where like you live off the drama of life. Like, what's the latest drama?
Yeah.
Who's got beef or what? You know what I mean? Like just
Yeah.
kid, it's like kid stuff, man. I mean, I'm sure, I guess adults do it too, but yeah.
Yeah, they do.
It's
They
that,
do.
it's that.
Jerry Springer's show pretty much made a lot of money for a long time.
Right, yeah. Drama, man.
Yeah.
I was still playing ball, which is interesting. I did still go to like the street ball courts, but it wasn't it wasn't the same, you know.
Yeah.
I end up so I was living like started to live that like party life where like where's the biggest party at? There's in the town I lived in there was always big keg parties and all this type of stuff. Who's doing what tonight? And it was like every night we were just going out and like just living that type of life, you know.
Right.
I end up meeting my wife.
Was God on hold at that point? Like,
oh yeah,
still believe in him, but not really talking. to him.
Yeah, exactly. and you can see the delusion because it's like, man, you were here when you were 16.
Yeah.
A couple years later, wow, this is dark. You know.
Yeah.
It got, you know, that was real dark, and I remember I did start to get to a place of being like really violent, where like
Are you still doing the cocaine with gold teeth at this point, or?
Yeah. So the timeline for him was like end of senior year, like my senior summer. He started to fizzle out, and he ended up moving back to Miami.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm kind of just like doing my own thing. I got my own connects. I got my little local weed connect and selling weed and stuff. I wasn't a coke dealer at that point because like he was the plug. So it kind of became like we still would party, like someone had, you know what I mean? I was still like doing stuff, you know what I mean? But I wasn't like selling coke at the time. Kind of started to reform my views on that because when I was selling coke, I remember that feeling of all my friends owing me money because like what you do is this evil thing called a front.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, I'll front you. And it's like, it's the most despicable thing you can do to people.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all know about the usury principles and all these different things and how you can live a life off just taxing people by fronting them things, you know? But that is a specific despicable one because it's so evil, man.
An addiction. Yeah.
And I remember that feeling of being like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this to my friends. You know what I mean? And so I had kind of stepped away from that and was like, I would just sell weed. You know, that was my thing.
Yeah.
So we're like, I'm living like a party life, living at my dad's. I'm 18, no real direction. You know, I end up meeting my wife. She happened to be the sister of my friend that I rolled with, and she had a fake ID. And we're like, who can get us some beer right now? You know, oh, my sister's got an ID. I'm like, call her up. So she shows up. She comes back, brings us some beer, and she's like, what are you guys up to? I guess she had been like fighting with her boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's like, what are you guys up to? Just hanging out, playing some spades, you know? And she's like, can I hang out? And so next thing you know, we end up playing spades on the same team, and that was the end of it. Next thing you know, we're married, and here we are. But yeah, so we end up hooking up and kind of getting a connection there, and she ends up staying. She ends up like literally staying, and she like never left my house. Like it sounds funny, but it's legit. Like she came that night, and we were bonded ever since then. Yeah. And so she's kind of like living with me, but she lives like down the street, like her dad's house. So it's not like she like really moved in, but she's just always with me at this point. And this is like 18-year-old summer after being a senior. Things moved really quickly. I ended up getting her pregnant, and we were just kind of like, whoa, like, what are we going to do, you know? And we didn't really have, you know, we didn't think it through much, like, as far as abortion goes. And that was pretty much the standard in the culture as far as I knew. Like,
unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah, that's what you do, you know?
Yeah.
So we kind of were, like, thinking about that. And I ended up calling, we didn't have money for it. right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
Back then it was, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
It wasn't so easy
Right.
back then. And I have nowhere to turn. I don't want to tell my dad what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I end up calling John
Yeah.
Staples.
Okay.
And I hadn't talked
the
to
guy
him.
who took you out during house arrest.
Yeah, and I hadn't talked to him in like 3 years.
He's still back up here in Massachusetts.
Yep. Yeah, he lived up here. I call him up and I'm like, John, and it's just so crazy when I think about the conversation because, man, did I like snap right back into how I used to talk?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's so wild when you think about that.
Hello, John. Got a little bit of a situation here.
Very deceptive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I talked with John and I'm like, I don't know what to do, man. And I did. I actually asked him, is there any way you could help me out with some money to take care of this, And he was like, whoa. Like,
Right.
He's like, let's talk about this for a second, And he ends up calling me back the next day and he's like, I'll do it for you. He's like, I'll help you. He's like, on one condition, that I come down there, I'm going to get a flight, I'm going to come down there and stay for a week and visit with you and Kath and just talk about some things, And I was like, sure. I'm like, that sounds great,
Good to see you. Hopefully you'll give me the $800 I need.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, baby, we did it. Yeah. He comes down. We have a few conversations. It didn't take long. I think probably the first conversation, really. And he convinced me to not do that.
Mm-hmm.
Praise God. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, John. You're a gentleman for that, John. And he's like, look, let's do this. He's like, I'll help you out. Help you guys get an apartment, get out of your dad's house. I was working a landscaping job at the time. He's like, you got money coming in. Let's look at your budget, And he helped me like start adulting. He's like, set me up to like, I'll get you your first and last, and we'll get you guys set up in a place,
Yeah.
And that's how we started our family. We were 19. Now I was still double lifing it, so I still had my marijuana exploits going on because clearly I couldn't afford this with just a landscaping job.
Right.
But John was like, seemed to think the numbers worked. I'm like, yeah, they work. I'm like, on paper it looks great.
Wow, you're a really good landscaper.
And so during that time, I start getting back into music. I got my own apartment now, so this is all new to me. Me and Kath got our own place. It was an exciting time for us. And, after having that time with John, it helped rekindle some of that stuff I had back when I was 16 with the Lord, where it was like, there was that feeling of like, okay, I'm going to head in the right direction. I didn't understand exactly what that meant, but I knew I'm going to be a vessel of light. I'm not going to live in the darkness and just be this, and then having my son definitely changed the way I looked at a lot of things, Kath always says that when she met me, she remembers I always had a knife and I was always very threatening when we'd go to parties. Like I had this urge to have drama. Like I was like, let somebody try me. Right. And I started to have this violence, a violent spirit, and there was a couple moments where I remember where man, I flipped out on some people, and it was true that it was I probably would have ended up doing something really bad or having something bad happen to me with the spirit I had.
Do you think that just comes that anger? Do you think it comes from the life and that can happen you're in that depraved sort of situation? There's drugs, and drinking, and fighting, and drama, or is it was it a deep-seated anger that you just hadn't dealt with? It was kind of coming out in that way, or maybe a little of both.
I think it was both. I think it's a good point. Clearly the culture encourages it, right? Where our culture encourages that. Let's go mess that dude up. Let's do it. Let's roll. Yeah. And so there's that aspect of it, but I think you're right in that there's some pent up anger. One thing that I always remember was that after my mom died, I never cried.
Yeah.
Right? I never cried until I got saved. I'm talking years, brother. I did not cry. You never I can't recall one time crying after my mom died.
Yeah.
Whether it was something
clearly you built some walls up.
Yeah. I definitely was hardened. It was I had faith but it was like part of that faith was like hardening, almost like it's like almost when you get into like that those lines of understanding of like when you start digging into like Romans 8 and 9 and you're like, well, it is what it is, boys. And you can just get a little, you know, you don't want to go too far and get too hardened, right?
No,
like,
you don't.
It's like, Lord, please don't harden my heart,
right?
you know?
Right. Yeah. So,
But so yeah, I think that it was a combination of me being like reckless. There's recklessness. There's not dealing with like how mad you actually are about things. Never dealt with them. Never talked about it. You know. And then plus the culture. Like it was conveniently acceptable and cool to act like this. You know. When I got with Kath, and we had Cameron, like that all started to change for me. Like she was the one that really softened my heart up. Like when I fell in love with Kath, it was like that softened me up, man. Because like I hadn't had anything like that.
Yeah.
Where like I was actually like felt like in love with somebody, and like all of a sudden it's like this big tough hardened guy is like melting.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you know,
got a baby, which is
yeah. And so that started to soften my heart up, and then you know that whole combination in that season with like having John come out, help me out, and see the grace that he showed me, because like just the grace he showed me, like why would this dude do this?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, why would he?
Yeah,
guys, you know, to me, I'm like, this dude's an angel.
Yeah,
you know, and it's hard for me to like disconnect that from God. I'm like, this is the hand of God though in my life working, even though like I said, I wasn't a believer. I didn't understand Jesus. But it was like I understood like God was moving and he was like had his hand on my life, you know, and it was just still part of my story.
Yeah.
Right. I still had that mentality going,
Yeah.
you know, and he but like I said, at the same time, I was still doing my exploits. So I was still selling weed and it started to pick up a lot. Like it started to get kind of heavy where it was a lot, man. I was selling like 10 pounds a week in Daytona. Like chances are if you were smoking weed in Daytona at that time, probably smoke some of my weed and you know what I mean? Like this is messed up. I mean, I'm not proud of that.
No.
But that was like the level of where I was getting to. And so I was involved naturally with people that had kilos and all that type of stuff. I just refrained from it. Right. And at the same time, I was putting out mixtapes and I started to catch a buzz and I got signed with a record label in Atlanta. Right. And if you look at my mixtapes and the content, you'll hear this theme of me being like, I don't sell coke like these scumbags. You know what I mean? And you can hear this theme and it's quite hypocritical, clearly, because I was sitting there selling a ton of bud. And like, you know, but in your rationalization, the way that seems right to a man. Right.
Right.
And it's like,
I'm moral for what I do.
Yeah.
You can sliding scale of morality. At least I don't sell coke.
Yeah. I remember a phrase, a righteous criminal. I think I used to use that phrase in some of my music, you know? And what a contradiction there, you know? The righteous criminal. Okay, Tim.
I wonder if that's part of why your music started to catch on a little bit. Obviously, you're good at it, but it's just some of the lyrics appealed to those who don't want it to be a straight up gangster, but they want the life, but they still want a sense of morality. And you're like, oh, you can have that.
I think that's where I got it. And too, like that,
niche in that,
it's like that artist Nas. He had come out with the Street Disciple and like was flirting with Christianity. And that was a big influence on me at that time. That was when I was that was when I was 16, and it was like I was like, okay, I was like, this does work. We can have both.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. You're kind of trying to marry the world to the Lord, and it's like obviously we know it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gave it hell. I tried.
You definitely did several times.
So I'm doing all this now. I have a friend come from the past, an old friend. And starts asking me, he's like, listen, he's like, I know you got the Connect. He's like, can you hook me up with the Connect to get these keys out? He's like, I need a quarter key, you know? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I literally had like 3 friends that were doing time for cocaine. Like at that time, like we're all young, dude. I'm watching my friends literally disappear, getting roped off in all these like sale and delivery charges. And I'm like, I don't want to go to prison, bro. I'm like, I'm not doing that. You know, people, there's all these things with people texting, getting wrapped up in these things. It was crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And he was persistent. He started hanging out with me like again. Like it went on for a couple months where he was like hanging out with me. Like really should have been if I was a millionaire, it would have been entrapment, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is entrapment because I was not doing that. But nevertheless, that's no excuse. I don't want to come off like I'm trying to make an excuse. But it was wild how he buttered me up into doing that, you know?
Yeah.
So I finally am like, all right, I'll see if the Connect will meet with you. I don't want to deal with it. And then he's like, he gets all excited. I'm like, and then he calls me back, and I call the Connect. The Connect's like, no, you got to deal with it. And I'm like, oh. And then he calls me back like a few days later, all excited. What's the word? And I'm like, can't do it. He's like, come on, man. And he really like talk about peer pressure. I mean, this is classic peer pressure. Like, come on, dude. And he almost I literally felt bad because he knew I could do it.
Right.
And to me, it wasn't like so ethical or moral. It was more of just like, all right, I'll do you this one favor.
Yeah.
To me, I was doing a good thing to do him a favor.
Right.
I'm like, I'm taking a risk for you, bro.
Right.
Not thinking about the people that it's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
You know, in the end, but but so I end up buckling and giving and say, all right, look, I'll do it for you one time. The way it works, he's like, all right, I just gotta grab a sample for you, get a sample from it, so I can make sure, and then I'll come back and get the quarter key, you know, the following few days later. So he comes in, a little unbeknownst to me, he's got a wire on. You know what I mean? Everything's being recorded. I had no clue, obviously.
Is this because he had gotten in trouble and he's getting out of trouble by entrapping you?
That's exactly how it happened.
So he chose you, or did someone want you because of all the weed you're selling?
So it seemed like it was a combination of both.
Yeah.
But he did get like 3 other people as well.
Okay.
So when I'll get to that, when it finally happened, it was all tied together.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like I wasn't on their radar. I was on the radar, and then he was like, "Oh, I can get him for you."
Yep.
You know. But he comes in. I'd never forget listening to the audio because my lawyer gave me the CD with it on it. Like I listened to the audio. I'm like listening to us play Madden. We go to the store together, get a snack. Like I'm like, dude, this dude got me good.
Yeah,
bro.
you must have felt pretty betrayed.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it.
And stupid too. You're like, I'm so stupid.
Yeah.
All that.
Oh yeah, totally. Thought you were smart.
Yeah.
Unreal. So he does that. I get him the sample. I had to give him like an 8-ball or whatever for the sample, and then he's supposed to come back in 3 days and grab a quarter key. We got it all set up, right? And now, meanwhile, just to put things in the proper timeline. So I got a 2-year-old son. Me and my wife are like a year into like starting our family. You know, I just got this record deal going. Things are actually looking like good for me. Like apparently there was some, I was getting spins on the radios in Atlanta. I ended up getting nominated for best mixtape in Orlando. So it was like things were going. My buddy, the producer I was working with in Atlanta, he was involved with like, he knew Akon, he knew, like he was involved with the people that know T.I. He was right from Riverdale, same town. So it was like, it was almost as if I was like, this is happening.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually going to make it in the music industry. And also all my people up here were following me.
Yeah.
That everybody was like, Tim's about to blow up, dude, you know? And it was all this stuff. And I'm like, yes, I'm getting out of this game. I don't want to, like, part of me was like, it's my way out of like having to pick up. I didn't want to pick up 10 pounds every week and keep doing this. It was, you know, who wants to do that anyways?
Yeah.
Just the work of it in general. Like, not that, not even the moral conviction, but just like, I got to get out of this, dude. I don't feel like doing this, dealing with people.
Especially, you know, not that they're all bad people, but I'm sure you're dealing with
a lot of riffraff, a lot of riffraff in the streets. So this is all going on, and I'm almost like feeling like I'm almost out the game, right? That's the idea. Like we all talk about, we'll get out the game once we make it. You know what I mean? Once we make it, then we can get out the game and go back to the church, man. You know what I mean? We'll get back to that Bible study we were doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was like, I had he comes, grabs that. By the grace of God, my connect ends up, his people in Texas get, crazy story, get into a shootout with police. That we can't get it now, right? The package is on hold. His whole shipment stopped. So I tell my buddy, he's all like, no, you know. Meanwhile, he's setting me up like a rascal. But,
it's like, this is gonna be harder to get you now.
And I was such a sucker, man. I just couldn't lie and say no. Like, no. You know what I mean? Like, most good drug dealers can just lie to you. I just wasn't good at that. And I always gave people $5 off. What are you doing?
Sale.
Real pushover. But he, so eventually the connect got back on like a few weeks later, but I had enough sense to stick to that story. And I just told my buddy, no, you can't do it. It's not back on, you know? Because my buddy was like, hey, we're back on if you want it. Because he was glad that I was, because he was trying, my connect was trying to get me to start doing that as well. So he was all for it. He's like, oh, let's go. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was like, nope, never mind, you know? So I felt like, all right, that's done with. You know what I mean? I'm not dealing with that stress. I'm always paranoid. I got the detectives watching me. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's over with at least.
Yeah.
So he calls me. He's like, hey, you got an ounce of bud? Randomly, the kid that was setting me up. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Come over, you know? And I don't know, obviously, he's setting me up.
Yeah.
So in Florida, you need 2 sales out of your property to get raided by the SWAT team. You know what I mean? So this is why they sent him to grab some bud, because that became,
a reason. Yeah.
that gave them the second sale. And so now, little do I know, I got warrants out to get raided. Somebody ends up coming into my house one night, and like I could tell someone broke in. It was weird. Like I came back, I went to a party. We come back late night at like 12:30, and my door was like, there was a perfect, it was so weird. There was like a perfect triangle cut out of the glass of my door. I don't know how they did it. It's had to have been a lucky break.
Yeah.
But it looked like a perfect triangle where I'm like, I walk up to my door and I'm like, this is right after a few weeks after this whole thing with this kid the dust had settled. And I'm like, what the heck, dude? I'm like, I tell my wife, I'm like, stay in the car. Well, we weren't married then. I'm like, baby, stay in the car. Lock the door. I got to go in and see what the heck's going on.
You're picturing Tom Cruise coming down. Like,
yeah, man. It was weird. So, so I left on a whim, like when we left. So I was in the middle of breaking down all this stuff. I had a bunch of money out. My whole table, it was like, thousands of dollars on the table.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I walk in, all the stuff's right there. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, somebody's still in here. Because all the stuff was still on the table. So I'm like, I'm wicked sketched out. I'm doing like the whole SWAT team sweep of my house. You know what I mean? Like, clear, right? And nobody was in there. So I was just like scratching my head, like, what is going on? And I'm like, I knew it could have been something fishy with police, but it was weird, But it was just, I didn't know what was going on. So I call somebody and I'm like, hey, I got to take all this stuff and get it out of my house. Someone's trying to get me, whatever. Bring it to my buddy's house. He takes it all for me. And the next night, so I had my house all cleaned out, nice, nothing there. Yeah. The next night at like 3 a.m, all of a sudden, here comes the loudest noises I've ever heard in my life. I was so scared, bro. I remember it because I had set up like a bunch of barricades in my back fence with like cement blocks because I was like, I don't want anybody getting in my backyard. I was all paranoid from someone breaking my window or whatever. Yeah. And that was a good barricade apparently because it took us some force to get it down. And man, was it loud. And I didn't know what it was. All of a sudden I wake up and I'm hearing this crazy banging in my house. And I was like, I got so scared. I thought someone was coming to kill me. It sounded like a giant was in my house, man. It sounded at one point like someone was just throwing a dresser around, like a toy. Wow. That's like what it sounded like to me. Yeah. Like a dresser's just getting thrown around the house.
Is Kathy there too?
Kat's in bed.
Yeah.
So we're in my bedroom locked. Cam's in bed with us, right? And I'm like, I'm listening to this noise, and I'm like, I'm not going out there. And I'm like, baby, call the police. And as soon as I say call the police, the blue lights come on outside. So as much as it's like, yeah, you don't want to get raided by the police, I was like, I never have had such relief when I realized when the police were there because I was like, I thought someone was coming to kill me, man. Like I really had a feeling like the people were sick of me making money out here and somebody's on, you know what I mean? And they're coming to get me, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so when I saw the police lights, I was like, oh, thank God. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm in here. I'm like, stop banging all my stuff around. I'm like, I'm in here. They come and get on the floor. I'm in my boxers, wood floor, freezing. I'm like, I remember being handcuffed. And it was messed up because I was doing jiu-jitsu at the time and had just dislocated my shoulder.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, I'm like, dude, I can't put my arm back. They're like, get your arm back. I'm like, oh, they ripped my shoulder out. I'm like, no.
Oh, man.
So we're going through the whole raid thing. I realized I'm like, you guys don't got nothing on me.
Yeah.
And they're like, no. here we do. And they hand me the papers. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. Dude, I had sale and deliveries for the cocaine and for the weed. And I was like, no way. And I'm like, and it started to connect where I'm like, how? I'm like, it was this dude set me up with a wire. I couldn't, it was mind boggling, dude. It was mind boggling. Just totally blew my mind.
Did you ever see him again?
I did.
Yeah.
So this is a blessing. This is a praise report. Was that when I was locked up, I reached out. So a few of my friends saw him right around town, and you know who gave him the worst time was my own father saw him. My father saw him at a bar and like really tried him. But I don't even want to say what he did because it's messed up. And but I wasn't a supporter of that. I actually wrote a letter to him from prison, telling him that I forgive him and that I don't want this issue and what happened here to impact his life. That it's like something that he can't bounce back from. You know, we all make mistakes, you know, and this was after I was saved, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? So this is where that letter came from the Lord. You know, the Lord forgave me, brother. You know, like, I forgive you. I know everybody hates you for what you did. I'm like, but listen, life's too short, man. Life's way too short. I'm like, we got to move on from this. And I'm like, bro, you need to open up a Bible and turn to Jesus, you know? And then come to find out, like 4 years later, he was in Bible studies and he was saved. And
was your letter impactful to that?
Oh yeah. He mentioned it. We talked a little bit. We didn't keep in touch, you know, but it was definitely a blessing to see that, you know, and like I have, you know, it was my own choice. Right? Like, I was the one who went against my own convictions, even as a non-believer, to cross that line and start and go get that coke after you just made a mixtape that got you a record deal. And one of the themes you're talking about is you don't sell coke, dude.
Yeah.
And for you to go do that, there you go. That's, you know, we all deserve death. We all know that. Like, as far as sin goes and the penalty for sin, I deserved a lot more than what I got for that. And the lesson was definitely learned. Like, when I have no animosity towards him or towards God for his judgment, because I clearly went against. That's what you got, bro. You're lucky they didn't come in and kill you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it also shows that moral scale that we talked about earlier, where if you have a sliding scale, you can slide it anytime you want, and always blame someone else. I got a moral code, but it's like after coming to Christ, you recognize, no, like, it was all wrong.
Yeah.
And,
right.
you know, I had this moral code that I just violated because if it's not based on anything, well, when I want to, I'll violate it, whatever excuse I have. And that's what happens for people.
Yep.
Is they'll always be able to slide the line and say, no, I'm still moral. It's like, oh, now you're in prison.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, it's like, I think too, like, part of that can come from, that idea of victimhood, right? Like, oh, the world did me wrong. Like, I think my dad might have struggled with that when my mom died. Like, he's expressed that to me. Like, he was really mad with God, you know, like God did him wrong. Yeah. And so it's easy to justify sometimes making bad choices because, well, you guys screwed me over, or however that, you know, that feeling is.
Victim kind of mentality.
Yeah. And I think that probably played a part in my life too. Like, when it came to some of those choices I made, those bad choices, because I'm like, yeah, well, look at my life. Dude. Yeah. My life's messed up. Right. I'm from a broken home. What do you want? From the street. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and it's like, it's easy to kind of just throw that around, but it's like, well, that doesn't change the fact that you're wrong, bro. I think that's what happens too, is like, you know, you have two parties that defend each other, and the one who feels justified is the one who did the least amount of offense. Right. But it's like, it's still offense. Right. Like, you guys both still are walking in offense, you know? Yeah. And we can do that.
So how long did you get locked up for?
So I was lucky. I ended up, I didn't really have, so as far as being a kid, like, none of that stuff that I got in trouble for, I was an adult now. Yeah. So, like, they didn't bring it up at all. Like, it wasn't held against me. Right. That was good. So
it was like your first offense. Yeah.
And so it was my first offense as an adult, so I had no priors as far as they were concerned. So they gave me a year and a day. Funny story, well, not funny. They actually, so here's something, is that I spent $17,000 on a lawyer, right? And I promise you that I don't want to say, like, he owed the state attorney a favor. on this one. And I feel like I got really shafted. I could have got the same sentence without spending any money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got the lawyer from my Connect. He's like, call my lawyer. Which I was like, looking back at it, I'm like, maybe I don't want to use my Connect's lawyer. Actually, he ended up becoming a state attorney. Like they were big dogs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, he did. I'm like, whatever. I don't want to talk. I don't say any names, right? We'll leave that alone. I don't want no trouble from the past.
Yeah.
But so I had a deal.
where-
I had a deal for 90 days though. Sorry to cut you off. I had a deal for 90 days and then 2 years probation.
Okay.
That was what I was gonna take, this deal. And the SWAT team raided me when I was out on bond for no reason. They said that they had 2 people complaining. So they had, if you can have 2 neighbors, there was some law where if you had 2 neighbors that would write affidavits, right? And then if the cops say that they witness any unusual traffic, they could raid you. And I wasn't doing anything.
Okay.
So it was a nonsense warrant but they knew, because they wanted me to roll on my Connect. They thought I was going to start rolling on everybody, and I wouldn't.
Start wearing a wire yourself.
Exactly. And I'm like, dude, honestly, I'll be honest with you. And that's why I told the detectives, I'm like, I'll be honest with you, bro. I'd rather go to prison than get these people mad at me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I got a kid. I don't want my kid getting kidnapped.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I'm all set with that, you know? So like even if I wanted to, no. It's not an option.
Right.
I did not roll because of that reason. You know, I'm like, no, I'm all set, dude. I don't want no trouble. I believe in the codes of not snitching. Sure. Well, that's great. But no, let's be real.
More about your family.
But let's be real. If it was somebody else that wasn't a threat, who knows what I would have done? I'd like to think I wouldn't be like that and roll on people.
Yeah.
But in this particular scenario, you don't want to roll on these guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I end up, that's why they tried. That's why they hit me again to take that deal off the table, to try to put more pressure on me to see if I would roll on this dude, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll take the year and a day. I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take it. Let's go, you know. And I took my time, and I was like, that's what I get. It's my time. I'll do it, you know. So I end up, and this is what was messed up when I went to court. I was supposed to have a month, like of being home and getting my things in order.
Yeah.
And I went to court, and there was all this confusion. My lawyer didn't even show up. He sent his assistant, and they're like, "No, you're getting sentenced out today, and you're going to prison today." And I'm like, I won't forget the way my wife, Kath, she's like, we thought I had another
At least
month.
had a month to kind of prepare.
Yeah, like a month furlough, and it was it. It was a wrap. That was a tough day in the courtroom, man. And so my journey goes like this. I go from that courtroom, and then I go to the cell. And right away in the cell, I start praying. Right? And I'm like, well, God.
Where are you? In Miami? Or
I'm in Daytona, Volusia County. Volusia County. And it was like instantly. So here's a story. I should tell this story. It was while I was out on bond. Because like my prayer life, right? Like, let's talk about a prayer life of a non-believer, really. That's what it boils down to, right?
God.
Yeah. And I'm like, I remember me and my wife had gotten to a thing, and I'm not going to get into exactly what it was. Maybe I'll tell you privately. But it was something along the lines of like, I was fed up with the world I had created and the life I had made, you know?
Yeah.
And I knew there was problems. And I said to myself, I remember walking into the bathroom. I was out on bond, and I was going to get that deal for like, you know, for a couple months or whatever, or 3 months and then 2 years, which is no time.
Right.
You know, so I probably wouldn't have changed my life. You know what I mean? And I remember going into the bathroom and just looking in the mirror and being like, God, I need to go to prison. I'm like, I need to go to prison. I need something to change here. Like, I need a change. I don't want this life, you know? And then it was a few days later I got raided. And then
God's like, all right.
And then, you're going to prison. And it was something that I embraced. It was like when I went to prison, similar to like what we talked about before, like how I had that mentality, like it's part of my story.
Yeah.
It's part of my story. And I'm like, and it was convenient for me as an upcoming rapper out in the Atlanta area to have, this dude's got street credit. Like he actually, he's not like the rest of these clowns out, right? That was like a theme, like all these fake gangsters getting on the microphone, and it's like, oh no, this dude really did do his time and did, you know, he really was doing that, you know, and so to me it was all like, this is all working out, right? Isn't that weird?
Yeah,
you're like, this is actually okay. I see what the plan is. All right, this is just part of it. I'll get out and I'll go hit Atlanta hard, and it's gonna all work out, you know. And so I end up going into that cell that day, and I'm under the courthouse, and I just right away just drop down and start doing push-ups. Right? It's just like a jail thing. You're like, I guess I'm just gonna start doing push-ups now. And
See it in the movies
I'm like,
anyway.
how's that shoulder? Oh, it's good enough. All right. And I remember though, just saying like that's what it was. Is I get in the cell and I'm like, all right, God, I'm like, here I am. You know, and that's what it was. It was like just do some push-ups, just get going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I get transferred. You bounce around a little bit when you first go to prison.
Mm-hmm.
I go to county. You got to wait in county to get transferred to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And then before you get to your final camp, you go to like a reception center. That's like, reception centers are crazy because that's where everybody goes.
Yeah.
Like you could be next door to
Hardcore
anybody. You know what
criminals,
I mean? It was in the reception center that I had a gentleman come up to my cell and give me a Gideon's New Testament pocket Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the small ones.
Mm-hmm.
I have one on my desk right now. I love those things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and so I'm like, oh. And right away I'm like, Revelations, Daniel. Right?
Yeah. Might want to try a different book.
Yeah, that didn't get
Psalms
me
or
too
something.
far. And so I'm sitting in my cell and I'm like, I start to read Matthew for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I need to read Matthew. Like, let me start from the beginning.
Yep.
Right? Let's just start at the beginning of this book. And this is my first encounter with like Jesus, right? And I start reading Matthew and I get to the crucifixion. And man, it, for whatever reason, it hit me like I started weeping, like it was real to me.
Yeah.
Right? Like it wasn't, I was envisioning it like real. Like it was like to me, like, you know, we can read stories and it doesn't, there's still like a disconnect.
Sure.
Like, no, like this really happened. Right? You know? And for whatever reason on that day of my life, in that cell, it was like I read the crucifixion and I was broken from it. And I felt awful about the story of the crucifixion. Now, I wouldn't say like I had a confession of faith at that moment, but it was like, man, it just broke me reading the Word of God and reading that crucifixion and what happened. And I just remember weeping and like it definitely changed me. It was a moment that I won't forget, you know, and it definitely changed me. And then, so I end up going on a journey of, so now I'm reading the Bible, right? I don't really understand. I don't, like, you're on your own in there, bro.
Yeah.
You don't got no elders, no counsel, no pastor.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm just kind of reading and learning on my own. And then by the time, so then like a month later, I get transferred to my camp. And now I'm in like an open bay work camp type thing where there's a bunch of bunks, like 100 bunks in a dorm type of deal. Kind of wild. But lower security. That's why we're all there, allowed to be there.
Yeah.
But they're still wild.
Still not the great people.
No, it's still kind of wild, man. And but I just stayed to myself, and so the thing about prison was that I was a really good basketball player, and I started to get really good again because I had all this time to just work out and play ball.
Yeah.
Like I started dunking. Like it was crazy. I was the best I'd ever been probably in prison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they were like, everyone was like, you better get out and go play college. That's what everybody was thought. You know what I mean about me in prison.
Yeah.
But so I was a really good basketball player and I was a really good rapper.
Right.
So it's like in prison,
Yeah.
I was very careful on like how I didn't tell anybody anything about me in the beginning. You know what I mean? And you start to build confidence with people, and then next thing you know, okay, this dude's nasty at rapping, and so it ended up being like prison was a good environment for me, which is weird.
Yeah.
Like it was like people liked me in prison because of those things. That's what people in prison like. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of us play ball, a lot of us rap. You know what I mean? I don't know what to tell you. And that was our culture, you know.
Yeah.
The dude's man of the trade, you know, and
Wow.
But I definitely stayed to myself a lot as far as like I wasn't very like didn't hang out in prison. Like I was either playing ball or I was studying.
Yeah.
And I got really into studying. But now when you go to prison, there's a bunch of gurus. There's a ton of gurus. So right away, I'm talking to like Freemasons, and I'm talking with the Muslims, and I'm talking with Buddhists and Universalists. And there's all this mix of thought, spiritual thought in prison, right?
Okay. Yep.
And so now I'm starting to not know about this Jesus thing,
Mm.
like as far as the validity of the Bible and other people's apologetics, and like, and this was back before, and like we were in prison anyway, so we weren't Googling nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this is like 2009 when people just finally started Googling stuff, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I couldn't wait to get out. Man, I was hungry to get out and get on Google, man. But so we're in prison and I'm trying to sift through all these lines of thinking and figure out, you know, at one point I was like more lean kind of towards Buddhism and that type of thinking. And then there was a point where I was really intrigued by like the esoteric Freemasonry stuff, like the secret knowledge and like Solomon's Temple.
That makes sense with your prophecy sort of mind, like like a revealed
right,
mysteries. That,
Yes, yeah. And I really ended up landing on Islam, which is funny. Most people are like, really? You're like a Muslim? And I'm like, well, if you ever talk to a Muslim apologist, you'll know why people, because those dudes are very crafty and they're not dumb. They're very deceived, but they're very crafty in their apologetics, you know? I wouldn't advise Christians to like go toe to toe with a real Muslim apologist if they're not a Christian apologist.
Yeah.
Like avoid that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't need seeds of doubt planted in you.
Yeah.
You know? So I ended up landing on like leaning towards Islam. It was more, for whatever reason at that point in my life, it just seemed like a better gig for me. And like, I think it also ministers to like the young soldier, militant, aspect too. Like there's a lot of room for that in Islam, where Christianity in America at that time was very soft and very feminine. And like I'm like, come on, bro. Every pastor sounds like a chick. I'm like, what are we doing out here? You know what I mean? It's like
didn't appeal to young men.
Yeah, you get so that's how Islam really does grab a lot of young guys. You know?
Yeah.
It's the fastest growing religion in the world. Like I forget the numbers, but thousands and thousands of Christians are converting to Islam every year in America, not just around the world, but it's like, it is alarming. But so I have this guy, he's a master chess player, Freemason Muslim. He ends up being like my bunkie, right? So we end up having we end up developing this friendship because of chess. And now I don't want to get started on chess. My name's Tim. I play too much chess. But yeah, so
rapper, basketball, chess player.
Chess is the biggest waste of my life. I swear, dude. I love it. I love chess, but yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, how many chess games did I play this year? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's the one that I got into playing chess with, right? And so chess is chess. Yeah, let me just keep talking about chess. There's a great man said this: you want to ruin a bright young mind?
Yeah.
Introduce him to chess.
Really?
Because what happens is you'll end up spending too much time. Where like the Lord wants you to do something else with that mind. Like chess is fine, but like if you're a 2000 Elo on chess, dude, you've wasted some time.
Yeah.
I'm not a 2000. I'm like a 15. I'm like a 1500. But yeah, me and my wife always joke about it because she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm not playing chess." I'm sending out messages. I'm not playing chess. I've deleted my app many times. Delete it. Done with it. I don't scroll on social media, but I will play some chess.
Yeah. Well, it's worse things, I suppose.
Yeah, right? That's what I said. Yeah. My sliding scale.
Yeah.
But anyways, so this dude really has me rattled with like his eloquent, loquacious glossal and his because he was very he was like a PhD. The dude had a really weird story. This Muslim dude. Like, what are you doing in here?
Yeah.
You got a PhD, but yet you were selling crack.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of this ain't adding up. Weird, you know? And he's a Freemason. He's got all this esoteric knowledge. You know, like I'm just a basic instructions before leaving Earth guy. You know what I mean? He's like, that's very basic to him. You know what I mean? And so I started to push back though and resist it, right? Like I didn't necessarily just want to be a Muslim, right? I started to push back and we would have little debates and he would always beat me. But I would just keep asking questions. Like that was what I learned. Just keep asking the right questions, right? Sift through this, make them answer these questions. And like, let's not move on. Like, we're gonna lock in on this question. Give me an answer for this then, you know? And he had a hard time because I wasn't dumb. and I was well thought, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what about this? What
Mm-hmm.
about that?
Mm-hmm.
And he would get frustrated with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it got to a point where he could tell I was starting to not buy it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I didn't have resources in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I didn't have the resources to like go online and do
Right.
actual research. So I had to listen to this nonsense and listen to people's arguments, you know, instead of like just getting where's the sources?
Right.
Let me get
Right.
the source. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it got to a point where and this is really where the tipping point was. One of the bunkie next door, the guy that's sleeping next door to us, he had a book called Breaking Free from Freemasonry. Which I suggest that book to anybody. Read that book. If you're a Christian dude, read it. You will open your eyes to Freemasonry and why it is a problem. But it's called Breaking Free from Freemasonry. And man, he found that book. So he ends up seeing that this book was sitting on my bed. He ends up stealing it, right?
Yeah.
Putting it in it. And I knew it. I knew he stole. And I'm like, dude, where's the book that was on my bed? You know what I mean? He's like, what book? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, bro, because he's always like, you're a book banner. He would always say that.
Oh,
and I was like, so I flipped it on him and I'm like, what are you worried about, book banner? I'm like, let me give him the book. He was so mad. And he wouldn't give it back to me. I finally he had his box open one day. I took the book back out of him. I'm like, because it exposes the nonsense of Freemasonry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a blessing that I got my hands on that book, and that's why I learned in prison. Books are so important.
Yeah.
And like controlling knowledge and information is so important. And like you look at history and all the times that books were burned, and like you look at the Dark Ages and how like man they just burnt everything up.
Yeah.
So and I'm so scared for the world right now because everything's online and digital and people take it for granted and we don't have books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, man, a book is so valuable.
Yeah.
It's like the movie The Book of Eli, where he's like, it's written in him. I love that at the end.
Yeah.
He's like, I have a copy. But so I get this book back, and I'm going through this book, and now he's losing his credibility with me. Now I'm like, you're pretty basic, bro. And the tables just turned. So. And I was polite. I'm a gentleman. I wasn't ever like condescending to him, but he didn't like that. He could tell I was and this was written by a Christian.
Yeah.
This book, so it helped influence me more towards.
Right.
All right, Jesus, what is this? You know. And so I remember, man, this lasted a week. Now this is my actual conversion story. This lasted like a week where I was seeking God continually, man. Like I mean, praying all the time, like. All day, many times throughout the day. Like it was on my mind where I'm like, God, who are you? I'm like, I just want to know you. Like, Jesus, is it you? Like, is it real? Like, I just want to know you, Lord, you know? And it lasted for like I said, like legitimately a week of me just keep asking. And like, there's nothing else for me to read, Lord. And like I heard this side, and I don't have like the sources and scholars at my fingertips.
Yeah.
To like, I need you to like now looking back, I'm like, well, if it was like right now, I'd be like, well, we can get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
We can sift right through this deception. You know what I mean? And but back then it's like I'm at the mercy of God. I'm like, you got to show me, Lord. I'm like, who are you? You know?
So it's almost like the benefit for you in that was it increased your faith because you couldn't rely on your own research. Even though that's good and important, you needed to just say, reveal yourself to me, because I didn't, later on you could do the research and back it up, but it's almost like the Lord knew, like you've done that before, like, all right, Daniel, and I'm going to get in all the stuff and I'm going to prove the point. And God's like, no. It ultimately does come down to faith.
Amen. Yeah. No, it's true. Because that's how I am. I'm geared like that, where I think even today, like we're going to do a Bible study next week, and it's like I'm hosting it, and it's on apologetics and why we can believe the Bible, like that Vadi Bakum answer type, like, it's a reasonable answer that we can give people, Yeah. And so I am still geared like that.
Yeah.
But it's like we definitely the head knowledge isn't gonna do it.
Right.
It's not gonna do it.
No.
Because
it can get you to a point, but ultimately you got to believe.
It's the gospel, man.
Yeah.
It's the simplicity of Jesus and the love of God. And while we were yet sinners, and it's like you could have all the prophecy and revelation in the world, but like Paul said, right? Without love, it's like it's even worse.
Yeah.
You're even worse. You've been better off with no revelation.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and so yes, for me, it was definitely a blessing because, like you said, I probably would have fell into that trap. I'd get out and just be
Arguing with
I'm a
everybody.
Christian by head
Right.
smart. I'm a head smart Christian. Like
Yeah.
I know this is true. Am I? Did I convert in my heart to it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's easy to be able to say, no, this is true for sure. But like, it's just like when I was a kid. I know the Bible's true, but we'll put that off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we'll circle back to that.
Yeah. Another sliding scale. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
And so I'm in prayer, man. And I remember this, I don't know where I heard it. But I guess it's a cliche. We all hear it. He comes as an angel of light. I don't think it's a cliche. I think it is a scripture, right? Satan shows up as an angel of light.
Yeah.
But you hear it, people say that a lot,
Sure.
And then I've heard about like how he was, and this is kind of speculative, but like how he was maybe involved with worship and leading worship.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You hear this?
Sure.
They pull scriptures out like he had a throat of brass or something.
Yeah,
I forget what it is, but it's like.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I've heard the people say like, well, we can't assume that obviously from exegeting the scripture, but you hear that cliche.
Yeah.
So, and this is what I'm working with in my prayer, in my thoughts, trying to sift through like who is God. And I remember like I'm sitting in prayer on my bunk, and I'm on the top bunk, and everyone's sleeping. It's like nighttime, and I'm just like praying, and I'm like, God, I need you to like show me who you are. Like it was just so important to me. Like I wanted to know him, I don't care what's true. I just want to know what's true.
Know the truth.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, like I felt like the Lord speaking to me. Like, how you get that feeling where it's not like a verbal, audible tone, but like in your heart, you're hearing this repetition, like angel of light, angel of light. And I'm hearing this angel of light, and like, from my studies in the Quran and kind of getting a little bit of the picture of like why everybody can memorize the Quran so easily and like what that's about, and like why scholars would say like the Quran's one of the greatest literary works when they, and because it's like a poem, it's like it's rhythmic, like in the way you recite it to where it's easy. And as a songwriter, I know how that works. Like if it's a song, you can remember, you get the first line, you can remember the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. And there's like this music aspect to it, and there's poetry, so to speak, to the Quran. And there is like these things in the Quran that seem to be supernatural. There's a couple supernatural moments where you're like, this is so then you have to sift through. There is such a thing as supernatural that's not of God. Right. So that's important, because if it's supernatural, well, then we're gonna buy it.
Right.
Well, let me tell you something. Pharaoh's buddies were doing some supernatural things.
Yeah.
So that's not how that works.
Right.
Right. And so all of a sudden I'm getting I'm hearing like this idea of like angel of light, and I'm like, why? What? I'm like, why do I keep hearing this in my heart, like angel of light? And then, if you know the story of Muhammad, Gabriel came to him in a cave and appeared to him and said that he was Gabriel, and he was the one that gave him the revelation of the Quran, and then Muhammad would go home and write it down. I guess that's
what he said.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting to note that this was like 600.
Right.
This was way after Jesus.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize that. People don't realize that Islam is really Arianism. The early beginning of Islam is just Arianism. It's you wanting to be Jesus, but not him being God.
Yeah.
That's what it really boils down to. Because if you read the Quran, Jesus is a great prophet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we can see that Aryan type view. You know what I mean? But I didn't have no resources then. I didn't know none of that stuff, right? So like back then, I'm just working with like this guy's side of the story and this, listening to the prison gurus, and so I'm sifting through it, and I'm like, angel of light, and the connection in my mind was like, okay, like why is the Quran so like poetic and like blessed in that sense, like blessed as a poetic work, And I'm like, okay, it was like to me, the light went on. And I'm like, it wasn't Gabriel, bro. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that was Gabriel. First, like, we looking back now, I'm like, clearly,
Right.
couldn't have been Gabriel. And I mean, we see this in all these. We see this pattern in a lot of cults, different offshoots of Christianity that tend to be like Aryan type,
Yeah.
where an angel showed up to somebody, right? And
Mormon, same thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is before I knew about any of this stuff. Now, you know what I mean? Like, I'm talking about some of these ideas are things that I've learned way after in my studies, but.
Yeah.
But like at that point on my bunk, I didn't know about none of this stuff. All I know is that I'm reading these books and I'm getting two different sides, and I just want to know who God is. And all of a sudden, it like clicks to me where it's like angel of light, and I'm like, oh, wait, like, so there's an explanation in my mind. I'm like, that was not Gabriel. That was clearly Lucifer. And that makes a lot more sense to me. And instantly it was like, dude, I was like the guy sleeping under me. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, he needs to know that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he needs to know that. And it like hit me because we were so close, like, as far as how many conversations we've had about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, it's not Gabriel. Like, sure, I'll give it to you that an angel came to him. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. There's like a bit of supernatural things happening here, where it's like hard to really dismiss it, like it's just the work of mere humans. But it wasn't Gabriel, right? And it's like births the next form of Arianism, right? In the church, early church, but so when that happened to me, this was like a moment where I'll never forget this moment. It was like I felt all of a sudden so exposed and so terrified, like almost like supernatural moment in my life where I felt like there was a demon, like literally like over me, like over my bed. Like I'll never forget this feeling of terror where I got so shook and scared where I just like literally like a little baby went under my blankets, bro.
Really?
Like I'm on my bunk and I'm like, like it all just in my mind, and like you gotta think this is a weird situation. It's not typical to have some guy sitting in prison for a week praying about who God is, and then I'm on my bunk in the middle of the night, everyone around me sleeping, and I'm just having this moment of like this wrestle in my spirit of like, who are you? And then it's like all of a sudden I feel like there's like ghosts and demons and terror floating around me because I realized like, this is not true. Like this doctrine, this teaching that's pulling me from or keeping me from the one true God is not true. And it was like this moment of like a shift in the room spiritually where it was like the enemy knew what was happening. Like he was losing his grip on me, so to speak. Right. And it was like this presence of it's like a heavy fear, like above me. Like I felt it a couple times in my life as a Christian after having like a breakthrough with somebody and like watching their eyes open and like leaving there and like on my way home feeling exposed. Like instead of being like so encouraged, like, yeah, Lord, we did it. Or like this type of thinking, you're like, the enemy again. You realize the enemy's, you're ruffling some feathers spiritually, you know? And that was this feeling. It's distinct. It's happened to me a few times, like I said. But this was the first time it's happened, and it was when I had... And whether or not it was Gabriel or that story is even true, it's just the reality that I broke free from that deception. However, I arrived there, right? Like I had arrived, and now I can say 100% in my heart, I have no doubt that that's not true. That's falsehood, bro. You know? And... I just remember being under my blankets and just praying to God and Jesus, just being like, Jesus, Lord, I believe you. And Lord, I need you now because I'm so scared. And like, it's so weird how I got so scared. Like when I think about it, I'm like, what? You're a felon. What are you scared? Like you're a tough, hardened criminal, dude. What are you scared of? You know, I'm sitting like a little kid.
Demons will do that, man.
Yeah. That's one thing I say sometimes is that, you know, those guys with those big dudes with those crazy demonic tattoos, though, trust me, they don't want that smoke, bro.
No.
They don't want it, you know? And I'm scared for everybody that thinks that they want that smoke because I don't have the answers. I don't know what it's going to be like, dude, but I promise you, you don't want that smoke, you know?
Yeah.
But it was like I started praying and I'm like, Jesus, please, God. I'm like, I need you, Lord. I need you. I believe you. I need you. And it was like at that moment, man, all of a sudden I felt this relief and like this calm. And, you know, I don't really even like telling the story because sometimes I feel like people try to
Okay.
conflate it with other experiences. Um, but it definitely was like all of a sudden, man, I got this warmth all through me where I was feeling so scared and cold, like almost goosebumps, right? From
Mm-hmm.
like this presence of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the Lord totally comforted me and like just sent like a warmth through my whole body
Mm.
where it was like, I wouldn't say it was like chills. It was like a warmth and it was like it lasted. I don't know. It felt like 10 minutes. It might have been 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Because it like the weight of that moment, you know.
Mm.
But I'll never forget how it was like I was so terrified when I realized that, um, like Jesus is true,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was
Mm-hmm.
like this is a lie, right? This Islam stuff, this Buddhist stuff. It was like all the stuff I had been studying, it all came to a head like, this is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is Lord. And for some reason, I'm terrified. And it's like, so we could almost say it's like you've unlocked the head knowledge,
Yeah.
right? So you should be scared,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
here's the moment. Okay, so now you finally do believe.
Mm.
So you should, in fact, be scared
Mm-hmm.
if you have not repented
Right.
and called on him.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened to me. It was like I had this moment of like having the true belief
Mm.
without, I have yet to call on him.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, soon as I like snapped, because I sat there, froze, man. I didn't know what to do.
Mm.
And then it was until I finally opened my mouth and was like, Jesus, Lord,
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah.
Help me, please, Lord. And it was like that
And that's when it
warmth
happened.
flooded. And it was just a moment, man, where I'll never forget that. And there's nothing, since that moment in my life, there's nothing. Because like that's how I came into faith, was like these debates
Yeah.
and like this type of stuff, like these deceivers, right? And it was like, there's been nothing ever since I became a Christian that's ever like shaken my faith, so to speak, and like made me doubt for a second. Like even when I would get into the inerrancy of the Bible and learn about these different sides of the story and what people are saying, like there's never been anything like that I haven't been like, oh, trust me, we can get to the bottom of this because I promise you he is true. And like
Yeah.
you might have a nice little quick little deceptive pamphlet, but I promise you, dude, we'll chop this and rightly divide this word right
It's
now.
like we said before, it comes down to faith. It doesn't mean it's not reasonable. It doesn't mean there isn't apologetics and all that. But at some point, you have to have that faith, which you have.
Yep, amen.
So what changed? Just about everything, huh?
So everything changed. So when I got saved that night,
Mm-hmm.
it was like I made it my business to learn the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So I started right in Genesis that morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up, this guy I knew had a really nice study Bible that his family had bought him. His grandfather gave to him, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And he never used it. And then he saw me, like, how I was reading the Bible a lot. And he was like, I got a really good Bible if you want to check it out. And I was like, what do you want for it? And I ended up paying the dude like $100. I got my wife to give this dude $100. I'm like, I'll take it, dude. I want it.
Wow.
I still have it. It's on my desk right now.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I just got into the word, man, and went through it and like did my highlights. I had a folder of like 100 pages of notes. Like I really studied, as best as I could on my own in prison,
Yeah.
And so that changed where I started to look at the Bible, and my friend, he realized like there was no turning back for me.
Yeah.
Like so our conversations kind of ended,
Yeah.
and we still played chess, but we respected each other.
Yeah.
But I just stayed. I stayed in the word like the whole time. I had like 7 months left, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 7 months to like just. To me, it was like I was like a kid again. First of all,
Yeah.
it was like I was a kid again. Like I was reborn for sure. Like the idea of reborn, like being reborn, it was like I was totally reborn. My heart was totally softened.
Yeah.
I was exposed. Like this Holy Spirit convicted me of all my foolishness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was like I looked at the Bible. Like there, I forget who it was. There was some scholar. I heard the story of him. I don't know if it was C.S. Lewis, I forget, but it was like he couldn't wait to get back to his office. Like that was his thing every day. Like he's like, I just want to get back to my office, to my desk,
Yeah.
and get back to the Lord. But there's like this feeling I had where, to me, like the Bible was like I believed the Bible even when I was young because of all the things, right? Like I
Yeah.
started to hold that view. I believe it. All right, I believe this. I believe, but do you have faith? You know?
Yeah.
And now it opened up to me like a treasure chest.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, this is for real. This is a treasure chest. This is the same, and it all became real to me. I started to learn about the martyrs and what that meant, and like it just started to become so real to me, and it was like I was so excited. I was so excited to do work for the Lord. I was like, Lord, I was like, send me. I'm like, I'll go, you know?
Yeah.
And I would say, so one of the things that happened was that my wife, I had started praying for her and I started writing her like crazy.
She's
right?
like, oh, man, another Bible study.
Yeah, she started to be like, what the heck's going on? You know, a lot of my family was like really like, what's going on with Tim? You know, he's got to get out and go to Atlanta, right?
Yeah, right. Right.
And I walked away from my record deal. I just totally didn't call him. I ghosted him.
Yeah.
I had to actually contact them 3 years ago because I started a record label a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got to make sure I don't have any legal situations. You know what I mean? Because I abscond and I have like, you know, I was supposed to drop an album with them, whatever. But they were cool. They cleared me and stuff. So that's good news. But but anyways, I start writing my wife, and man, all of a sudden I get a letter from her in a similar format of how I've been writing letters, where next thing I know, she got around some Christians, hooked up with some Christians, got baptized in the Atlantic, and now she's on fire for Christ. And it was like, it was such a blessing, man.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, God is good. I mean, in prison, I had a couple interesting moments of like those little honeymoon believer moments where like God showed me a couple little miracles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was this moment I had where I went to this Bible study, and at the chapel, you know, the guy comes in and does a Bible study for us, and at the end of the service, it was a blessing, and I wanted to go shake the guy's hand, you know? So I go up, and this guy's kind of like, you know, he's probably more of charismatic, like prophetic dude, which is like, you know, it's all good. I have my own, we all have our different, we all lean different ways. I'm a very skeptical guy, be it like judging by how I came to faith, like I don't just take things for granted. I do like to get to the bottom of things, you know?
Yeah.
But I have seen some stuff, man, that does make me wonder. I'm like, huh. I'm like, that's interesting, you know? It's like they say, you know, it's like sometimes it has to do with, it's everybody's faith involved here.
Yeah.
You know, like God does move and heal. But it's like, you know, it's not set, there's no recipe for this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But so this was an interesting moment where this man, I go up to him to go shake his hand, and he's like, as soon as I touch him, right? Like, he's like, pulls his hand away from me, and he's like, whoa. And he's like, you're about to go home. And I only had a month left. Or not even. It was like a week left, right? So I was just like, yeah. I'm like, that's wild that you say that. You know what I mean? I'm like, I am, sir. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm not really into people reading people's mail, whatever. You know what I mean? It's whatever. But you know what I mean? But I can't deny like this moment because it was so weird, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, you're about to go home. And one of my friends was there with me. So like he kind of was like, what the? You know what I mean? Like he witnessed it, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, yeah, man, praise God, all right. And then I go to give him like a more proper handshake, like half hug, half handshake. And as soon as I touch him, he's like, you're about to get married. And I was getting married in like 3 weeks. Like we had set the date and everything. I was getting married, you know? He's like, you're about to get married. And I was just like,
stop it, man.
I'm like, all right. I'm like, and then, and I'm like, that's crazy. And my buddy's like, what the? He's one of these guys, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. And then I go hug the dude. I'm like, all right, man.
See what else you got.
Yeah. Go hug the dude. And then he's like, you do something. He's like, you do something, man. He's like, you sing or you do something. And he's like, God wants to use you. Oh, look at me. What a bad interviewer. I got my phone on.
Oh, it's okay. Surprised it hasn't been going on.
Unreal. My apologies, people. Yeah, he's like, you do something. He's like, God wants to use you. And my buddy's like, he knows me, so he's just like, yeah, this dude is gonna go out and do stuff with the music. You know what I mean? And it was just like a weird moment where I was just like, that was weird. And like I said, the guy, it didn't seem like a overly like the message or anything was overly charismatic or anything. It was just like at the end when I went to go shake his hand. You know what I mean? It was just interesting. He didn't, for all I know, he wasn't even like, you know, it was just one of those things where, so I'm walking out of there and I'm like, we're all walking in line now. We got about 200 yards to walk through the yard to get back to our dorm. And it's dark now. It's like 9:30 at night, 10 o'clock. And I'm like, I walk out of there and I'm just like, God. I'm like, what is that? I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, so I'm in prayer, I'm walking, and I'm just like talking to God. I'm like, Lord, you got to show me something if you want me to believe that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, you're going to have to show me something, man, because that was weird, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm walking and I'm saying this, and I'm like, and all of a sudden, as I'm like praying to God, just saying, like, show me something, man, you know, just show me something, you know? All of a sudden, this bird, which was so weird because it was like pitch black dark outside.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this bird just, boom, like flies right in front of my face by like, literally, man, like inches to my face, just flies by me. And I'm like, whoa, like it like startled me. Like I was like, what the heck, you know? And it was so startling that I just was instantly right out of prayer and was just like, what the heck, you know what I mean? Like back in the world and like forgot that I had just been, you know what I mean? And then as I'm walking and I'm like, that was crazy. And then I'm like, Lord, show me something. And I'm like, oh, right? Like, right? And then, but now me being stubborn, right? I'm like, no. I'm like, that's not it. I'm like, you need to show me something.
Yeah. Gideon over here.
Yeah. And so now I'm like, man, I'm like 200 yards away from where that happened. And I'm about to get into my dorm. And I'm like, God, you got to show me something though. I'm like, this is too much, too random, you know?
Yeah.
And man, that bird came buzzing right by my face again, bro.
All right.
And I was like, all right, Lord. I'm like, I'm here, Lord.
Yeah.
I had there was a cool moment where the phones were broken and I was getting out in like a couple days, right? And something happened where they would not let us go get our books. I ordered some books and they got to release you to go get your books.
Yeah.
Right? And the guy wouldn't let us get our books. And I was kind of frustrated. I'm like, that's messed up, man. I'm like, and the guy looked just like Ben Stiller from Happy Gilmore.
Oh, really?
So random, right? and I was like, I look at the dude standing next to me. He's all mad because he can't get his books.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's up with this dude from Happy Gilmore? And the dude heard me.
Uh-oh.
And man, this dude comes flying out from behind the glass, like they're in the bulletproof glass thing. He comes flying out. That's it. He's like, you're going on lockdown. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I hadn't been in any trouble at all since I've been in. You know, I'm about to get out in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And if you get locked down in the box, it's for a week and you don't have phone access.
Right.
So I'm supposed to get picked up by my wife in a couple of days. She's going to be like, where the heck is he?
They can extend your sentence if you're...
Oh, yeah. So you lose your good time.
Yeah.
That would have been the other thing. I would have had to do 2 more months.
Oh, my goodness.
All over that, saying something stupid like an idiot. I'm like, Lord, forgive me. I'm like, that was stupid. But man, did he look just like Ben Stiller from Happy Gilmore, bro? It was crazy. My fingers hurt. So I'm like, this is crazy. He's like, I'm coming back. He's like, I'm coming back in the morning. He's like, and I'm going to think about this. He's like, but you're getting locked up. He's like, I guarantee you. He's like, I'm not sure if I'm going to write a bad report or not. He's like, but you're getting locked up. And I'm like, bro, please. I'm like begging with the dude. And he was like stone cold. I'm like, man. I'm like, I wasn't even that. I'm like, it's just a joke, man. I'm like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right. Not even that.
I'm like, I got like 3 days left, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're going to make me stay here for 2 more months. You know what I mean? It was sad. And so I had that night to call my wife and try to tell her, look, like, don't come this day because I don't know now, like what I'm getting out, you know? And, excuse me. And the phone was broken randomly that night. It was like never happens.
Yeah.
Everyone's mad.
Yeah.
The whole dorm's mad. No one can use the phone. Everyone keeps going up and trying. By like 6 o'clock, nobody was even trying anymore. It's broke. Phone's not working. And I'm like, dude, I need to use the phone, bro. I'm like, I'm gonna go try it. And it's like, if you went and tried it, everyone clowns you. Like,
Yeah.
you're an idiot, dude.
Yeah.
Doing your time in the streets. Doing your time in the streets, bro. That's what they say. Hey, man, don't do your time in the streets, bro. That's what everybody says. And I'm like, I'm doing my time in the streets, bro. I'm about to be out of here. But I go up to use the phone. I get ridiculed. They walk of shame back to my dorm. They're like, so, did it work out for you? You know? I'm like, I'm going to go try again, right? I go to try again. And at this point, people are really dogging me. They're like, dude, come on, bro. Really?
Yeah.
Like, nobody can use the phone. All right? The phone's broken. Just deal with it, you know? And I'm like, and this was weird. All of a sudden, I'm like, it was like, man, it was like the Spirit of God, like, whispered to me, like, no, go use the phone right now. Like, it's going to work. It's going to work right now. Listen, dude, it's so
the
weird.
Green Mile, you're walking to the phone.
So weird. It's so weird. So weird. It wasn't like I said, like a verbal thing. It was just like,
really felt the.
It was like, you know what it was? It was like, it was just like the way the word was like angel of light, just like a phrase.
Yeah.
It was like 3 times, right? And I'm like, no, I'm thinking I'm playing, you play tricks on your own self sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, I gotta go try it one more time.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
only one way to find out.
I'm like, they're gonna clown me, bro. I go walk up, pick up the phone, dial tone. Phone's working. Call my wife, tell her what's going on. Right? People hear me talking on the phone, and they're like, "Phone! Here comes a huge crowd. The phone's working."
Yeah.
I hang up the phone. Phones are broken.
Whoa,
dude!
Did they take it out on you? Like, hey man, what'd you do?
No, I know, right? No, it was just so random. It was like,
yeah.
And I ended up. The guy came in the next day, and he's like, I'm not gonna lock you up. He's like, I just wanted you to worry about it all night. I'm like, you son of a gun. But it made an occasion for to increase my faith.
It did. God used it.
It was crazy though, dude. That the fact that I walked up and made that call, and everybody was like, "Oh, the phones are back on. Sweet."
Yeah.
And then, nope. I hung up the phone. The phones were back off.
Wow.
And I'm like, that was a God thing. It's like, how they say, like, you get the honeymoon experience where, like, these little things happen that they're not so significant, but they are to you.
Well, I think also they happen in places like prisons because there's so many opportunities for things to go so badly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so, now kind of just before wrapping up our conversation, you've had a lot of time to think about what God did and all that. What's a big 1 or 2 takeaways just about that people can hear, like that you've learned about God through it all?
As far as my story of coming to Christ and like we just talked about.
Yeah.
I think it's like one of the biggest things is to realize, like you had mentioned that, is that the seeds that get planted.
Yeah.
Not to take them for granted. And like the work that you can do in someone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
Not to take that for granted, because it's like all those seeds come together, right? We've all heard that, where it's like it takes 7 times before someone finally.
Right.
And it's like, for me, it took that 77 times 7 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's between that and like, understanding that I understand like not everybody's gonna have the same pathway to faith, and like, so for me, it was hard for me to believe that people have faith when they haven't gone through things. Like that's how it was for me as an early Christian.
Yeah.
And like, because I was such a bookworm and study animal, I always was.
For those that aren't, you're like, you're not a real Christian.
Yeah, I started to become like a legalist, right? And you think everybody, and then I realized, wait, I haven't been studying much. I'm like, wait, it must be nice when you have 7 months in prison to just sit and study, dude.
Yeah.
So it's like, I would tell people, like, it's not all about understanding everything. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to.
Yeah.
I think it's good to learn things to defend your faith.
Yep.
But it's definitely about the simplicity of the gospel.
Yeah.
It really is, no matter what. I've been the type of guy where, like, I went through every type of denomination. I've had good friends in every type.
Yep.
You know, there's good Christian people in every type.
Yep.
And like, I'm at a point in my life where, in my walk with Christ, because of coming from like an apologetic style background, that I think it's like, I love when Paul said, you know, for this reason, I'm determined to preach just Christ and Christ crucified.
Man.
You know, because there's so many things we can get caught up on, you know,
Yep.
and it's like, man, it's so much simpler than that, you know.
Yeah.
Like, sure, we can debate the secondary items, and like, it's important. I think everybody should, if you want to be like that, well, then learn both sides,
Right.
and build
Approach it with an open mind and an open heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would always advise, like, listen, build a steel man to someone's argument.
Yeah.
Of both sides. Don't build a straw man on their side and build
Yeah.
a steel man on your side.
Yeah.
Like, figure out the steel man on both sides and be honest and have integrity with that. But those things, and just, I think it's like, man, there's these key things that we need to know. And it's like when I'm sitting on that bunk, and it's like, is that Jesus is Lord, in fact.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it's all about. Is like, man, that simplicity of the gospel, understanding, letting the Holy Spirit convict you, like saying, Lord, search me out and convict me, because it's so easy to avoid that. It's easy, even as a Christian, it's easy to not see things clearly. Like you said, even as Christians, we have our sliding scales. We're all subject. We're all subject to our bias and you know what we would allow. You know, some people, it's like right now, I'm working hard to try to make sure my family has more of a, I want to be more traditional at my house now. Like, I've always been kind of liberal because, like I said, I've always had people stay with me, and then
Yeah.
so we've had kind of an interesting dynamic
Yeah.
at home. But now I'm like, no, I want to do like a daily devotion. Like, you have to be at the table.
Yeah.
And we need a daily devotion.
Yeah.
And like so it's like I find myself trying to take advantage of the time right now, and just realize that, you know, we're not promised any time. And it's like, looking back now, man, I feel like don't be like me, and then and look back and be like, man, I wish I would have started doing that
Yeah.
then, you know.
Yeah.
And like, I've been this is back in 2009 since
Yeah.
I've been a Christian, and raising a young family. So it's like we learn as we go, man, you know.
Well, as you mentioned, like, I mean, you have obviously a pretty sensational testimony, but you don't want that for your kids.
No.
You want the boring testimonies, like, yeah, are you really a Christian? You know.
Yes.
You know, we always say that, and
Exactly.
it's true. Because it is the simplicity of the gospel. Because you can. That's why churches are unlike anything. And I'm not saying the building. I'm saying the people. When you really look around and you see the diversity, and I'm not just saying it can be ethnic, absolutely, that's part of it. Yeah. Language, ethnic, culture, but age. You get an old grandmother over here and a teenage boy, and they have nothing in common except they both believe Christ. You have someone who came to Christ in jail. They have someone else who grew up in a Christian home and never wavered, and they're both saved because of the gospel.
Amen.
And that is a great takeaway. So, like, people aren't like, oh, man, if I want to become a Christian, do I need to go start selling cocaine? No.
Hey,
you know.
Well, here's something on a quick note, is that just recently I heard somebody saying this. I forget where I heard it. I need to do better with that. I always have that in conversations.
Yeah, I do too.
I forget who said this, but someone said it. It was great. But, like, to share our testimony with our children, right?
Yeah.
And for me, like, as an early Christian especially, I had a couple of Christian people that I looked up to, that when I heard certain parts of their testimony, it kind of like hurt me a little bit, because it was like they were someone I was looking up to, right? So it was like a concept.
Tore them down a little bit, like, in your eyes.
Yeah, or like or what it did was it legalized something to me that, like, I wasn't struggling with that and thinking about that, and then I've heard this guy was dealing with that, and for some reason it like, but it's just like one of those things where you realize that it's not about you know, as far as your testimony goes, like, I can't share everything with everybody, just anybody.
Right.
You know, and like but the testimony is so powerful, because when I think about especially early in my walk, it was the testimonies I heard from people that had like something crazy happen, and this happened, and God did this. And you hear these testimonies and you don't forget them. It's like they get stuck in your mind. You're like, dude, I'll never forget that story this dude told me. And it's like the power of our testimony,
Right.
you know? And somebody said recently, like, you got to share your testimony with your kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I actually, because my testimony is so wild and outlandish,
You're like, I don't want
like,
to
I
do
didn't even tell my kids I like made music for years.
that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want them to think I'm a rapper.
Right.
Right? I totally changed like my view on things.
Yeah.
I tried to, now I play piano and play guitar and I like try to be, but I actually did go back to rapping lately, the last couple of years. But anyways, but so lately I took my boys out and I'm like, all right, boys, it's time. We went and got dinner somewhere and I just talked their ear off for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we didn't make it. We made it right up until the point where I got on the bed. And like
Now they can watch this.
yeah. But I'm like, man, it is powerful. So it's like a good takeaway would be, I think that's a good takeaway. Is like, don't look at my testimony and think, you know, oh, I got to go do this now because, and I know that feeling because I've made that mistake too. So I would say also, you know, there's certain parts of your testimony that might not be for your 10-year-old. And there's certain parts that might be, it's not all black and white, as far as that goes. But your testimony is so powerful. Like to see the change, like it's basically, the Bible is a testimony of what God did, and what He's doing, and that's what your testimony is what God did in your life and what He's doing. And I think that is like all the apologetics.
Yeah.
It's like
people's stories.
It doesn't even come close to the impact that testimonies make on somebody, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole reason for this podcast is just to hear people's stories because it's that powerful, you know? And I think people do need to realize, not if they're like, oh, I got to do that, like what you did to come to Christ. I think most reasonable people can recognize, wait a minute, I don't need to do that. I got my own struggles. They may not lead me to prison, but they're still wrong before God, right? I need a savior. But what I'd want people to also realize is even though you're saved and God clearly has dragged you out of stuff and protected you from so much, there are consequences for the things you did and for the time you did waste. Right? There was opportunities where like, oh, you know, like when you're in house arrest or, you know, that you could have and you didn't. Now, God always had his hand on you, but there's consequences that, you know, you wish you didn't have to go through all of that.
What ifs?
Yeah. And things like, man, I could have been more for the Lord back then, you know, and it doesn't mean that you should feel guilty because guilt's been taken away by Christ, but people should know it's a good thing if you come to Christ at a younger age. You know, you can impact the world that much more and that much, you know, longer.
I'm actually dealing with this right now in my life.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I started off and got right into, when I got out of prison, you know, we had a young family. We were starting a young family, but we got right into ministry, like big time in Florida.
Yeah.
We were involved with tons of like home churches and big churches. And like, you know, me and my wife being so young, they loved that. Like people loved us. Pastors loved to have us. Like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
You know, and we got off to where we were just running full speed ahead. And then it's like, and then we had more kids. And it's like, I got to a place where I was like, well, hold on, slow down. I need to make sure I'm taking care of things on my home front before I'm like spending all this time in ministry.
Yeah.
And I start to realize that balance at a young age.
Yeah.
And then there was part of me that like put off a lot of things. Like I put off pursuing music. I put off pursuing studying in ministry. Like when I first got out, I was like, I'm going to be a scholar.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm so in love with this, you know? But then the cares of the world and like the work, the 9 to 5, all of the beat down that we get, you know? It's like right now I'm literally dealing with this thing where I'm trying to, I like in a sense of repentance before God, like I don't want to waste any more time, the Lord.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be content like putting sprinklers up in Boston because I make enough money to pay for my mortgage and like, you know, and like settle here.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be like I want to make sure I'm doing the best with my time that you've given me, you know. So I started to start a record label. Where we're trying to pursue ministry to an extent. We might do a little gig and do a Cafe of Hope thing, but what happened was I got a song on the radio 2 years ago, like a year and a half ago, and on like Holy Culture Radio, Sirius XM. So I was starting to it was starting to happen again. And all of a sudden I felt like God just like stopped me and was like, hold on, son, you need to go hit the books for a little bit though. And that's kind of where I've been at the last like year and a half, 2 years. Is like, let me get equipped. Like, Lord, equip me. I don't want to be, out here putting out music and saying things that probably
aren't true. Or,
because that's what happened. I had a song that it was like something about demons, and there was all that stuff going on in the church during COVID, where like all of that demon stuff was going on. And I remember, and I never really subscribed to it, but I had a line in the song where I was like, I'm like, I don't really like the way that came off, actually.
Yeah.
As far as like what side of so some type of doctrine you'd be talking about.
Yeah.
Whether it's like demonic possession, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it really made me put a break on it, where I'm like, okay, I got this music going, but slow down. Let me go hit some C.S. Lewis for a bit. Let me go hit some history. Let me get some church history going. And I've been falling in love with that.
Yeah.
But this year I want to get back into making that, to carving time out for ministry and music, try to get my kids involved with some cool stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely, like you said just now, like that time, like, dude, like how many souls, how many seeds could you have planted?
Right.
Like you're going to hang out and just be like, well, I'm working. I got young kids.
Yeah.
But it's like, that doesn't mean you keep your mouth closed.
Right.
Like we're all called to minister to our neighbors, to our coworkers, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point. It's like, don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait. Come to Christ today.
Yeah.
Like, don't put it off.
No.
Because there's no telling, because there's plenty of people that put it off, and trust me, it doesn't work out. Like, I was very fortunate that the Lord swept me up out of that, because I was, like I said, that dude could have easily not gotten to a shootout in Texas. And the next thing you know, I'm doing 7 years instead of 1 year. And then who knows what could happen in those 7 years, the type of trouble you get into.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Like, if my family would be together. Like, people ask me sometimes, like, how are you guys so married and everything worked out? And I'm like, Jesus, bro. I'm like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Me.
Christ alone, man.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us at least part of your story, and definitely look forward to seeing, hey, how God does redeem the time.
Amen.
In your family and your ministry, your music, basketball, chess, who knows?
Right. I'm going to get to 2000. I'm going to get to 2000. That'll be my last task in life.
All right, man. In retirement.
Yeah, right.
The hoops will be gone, so you can play chess.
Once the knees are gone. Yeah.
Well, anyway, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
It's a blessing to be here. Thank you, sir.
All right. And cut. Nice.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was awesome.